Okay, howdy. Oh, okay, good morning then. I guess there's no Aggies in the house. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm Karen Butler-Purry from Texas A&M University, and we'll start the meeting by going around and doing introductions.
Good morning, everyone. I'm James Goman. I work in the Division of Academic Quality and Workforce, and I've been working with the GEAC committee for a little over 10 years now.
Good morning. I'm Karen McCaleb, Dean of College of Graduate Studies at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi.
Dean Nykerk, I'm Associate Dean at the University of Texas at Austin.
Jennifer Schrader, Jennifer Schrader, I'm currently the Interim Dean of the Graduate School at Texas A&M University Commerce.
I'm Rick Berry. After years as Dean of Fine Arts, Provost, and Dean of the Graduate School, I finally have returned to what I know how to do, and that's Professor of Music at Stephen F. Austin State University.
Good morning, Raj Kumar Lakshmanaswamy, the Dean of the Graduate School at Texas Tech University Health Science Center at El Paso.
I'm Devanna Fulton, Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Houston downtown.
I'm Raymond Jackson. I'm the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies at UT Arlington.
Mark Sheridan, Dean of the Graduate School at Texas Tech University.
Kathy Matthew, Associate Vice President, Academic Affairs, University of Houston, Clear Lake.
Sarah Larson, Vice Provost and Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Houston, main campus.
Barry Lambert, Dean of the College of Graduate Studies, Tarleton State University.
Blanca Bauer, AVP, Academic Assessment and Effectiveness, UT Health Science Center, San Antonio.
Lucia Dura, Associate Dean at the University of Texas at El Paso.
Sarah Lynn McKinnon-Crowley, University of Texas at Austin, Student Representative.
Elizabeth Vogt, University of North Texas. I'm the Director of University Accreditation.
I'm Ambika Mathur. I'm the Vice Provost and Dean of the University of Texas at San Antonio.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Nalos. I'm here with the coordinating board.
Okay, we also want to welcome, I guess, a new member, Claire Peel. Thank you. And then we have several outgoing members. John Sagan, is that right?
That's right.
That's right. Okay, Cynthia Rutledge, Karen McCaleb, Thomas Kruger, and Blanca Bauer. So thank you all for your service. So I guess a little bit of housekeeping. So we don't have anyone on the phone at the moment. Oh, I did want to mention that our Vice Chair, Andrea Galata, was going to join us, but she actually is ill, and so she wasn't able to join us by phone. Okay, so when you are speaking, please press your microphone button. I guess that's so that if anyone decides to join us by phone, and then maybe also there's some taping purposes, please make sure you've turned in your lunch money. And when we have action items, and I will, I guess, identify those, then we will need a motion and a second to accept things. And discussion items won't require any type of action.
We do have 3 individuals today that are serving as delegates for their GEAC members, and so they're invited to participate and engage in the dialogue and presentations and discussions today, but unfortunately they are not able to vote, and so that's the only limitation that our 3 delegates have today.
Okay, and I think following the meeting, Jennifer will be sending surveys so that you can enter, I guess, travel and cost information. And this, I guess, for parts of annual reporting for the coordinating board. Okay, so I think that is it, and so we'll move into the formal agenda and start with review of the summary notes from the meeting in February. Hopefully you had an opportunity to review those. And I guess if there are no edits, correct, oh, yes, okay.
Sorry, there is one edit. I was in attendance via phone at that last meeting. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, if there is nothing additional, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor of accepting the meeting summary notes, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. So approved. Okay, so next we will move on to update and discussion on the strategic plan for graduate education. I think Jennifer and James are going to lead that conversation.
Thank you, Karen. This is just a quick update because not much has changed since the last meeting, unfortunately. That's not too much of a surprise given the intensity of the legislative session. Jennifer and I have made some revisions in response to our leadership reviewing the document. It's still within our division, I can tell you that. What we plan to do is to work with the document over the summer, and over the next couple of months, we're going to get into shape where we can get approval, both from our division and also from the deputy commissioner and hopefully the commissioner. And we're looking at getting it out for public comment, probably toward the end of the summer or maybe the first month, say September of the fall. Following that, we put up for public comment. We'll consider any comments that are made, and we'll put it up for board consideration, I hope, at the September-October meeting cycle. So that's our plan at the moment. Do we have any questions about the strategic plan? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so our next item is a presentation on trends from the program inventory.
That's right. So you have in your packet for agenda item 5, and this is basically this is a follow-up. Last time I had shared some information with the committee about a recent request that we made back December, I think it was December 21st of 2018. What we wanted to do was to do a sort of a validation and cleanup of our current program inventory listing. So this is simply an opportunity for you to look through what we have listed for each of your graduate programs and compare that to your own accounting of, say, what credit hours are required for particular programs or similar to, degree designations and things like that. And where you see mismatches and inaccuracies, we invited you to respond to us with corrections on that spreadsheet. And so I gave a summary at the last meeting kind of describing the various credit hour changes and title changes and start date changes that we had made, along with a few phase outs, because some of you noticed a few programs on your inventory that you actually hadn't been using and had intended to tell us about, but you just forgot to tell us about it. So, we took care of that kind of stuff. Part of the reason we did that was, of course, first, it's important that the inventory be accurate and that what you think you have and what we have down for you match up. But secondly, in about every 10 years, in 2000, 2010, and I believe 2020, the Federal Department of Education updates all of the classification of instructional program codes, i.e. SIP codes. Those are the codes that classify your programs and your courses according to a discipline area. It helps us basically figure out what kind of course or what kind of program is this. Well, one of the ways we tell that is by the SIP codes assigned. So in 2020, we'll probably see new SIP codes created, and we'll probably see some older SIP codes phased out and gotten rid of. That means there's a lot of movement and switching around and moving things around within the program inventory. And if we're going to be making all those kinds of changes, it's really helpful to start from an accurate point and move to a new place rather than have to try to make corrections while you're trying to move a bunch of things at the same time. So thank you to all of you here and out there listening, all the instructional reporting officers who helped put all these changes together. So At the February meeting, I gave you some kind of a little more detailed summary than I just gave you, describing what changes were made and how many of them there were. And at the end of that, the committee asked, well, could we get some kind of inkling of how things have changed over time? So I asked my staff to dig up some data, and if you look there on the next page, start on page 14 of your packet, we've got some charts here for you to look at. So the first one says new graduate programs by two-digit SIP, and it shows all of the SIPs 01 through 52. And you can see that by far we've had the most activity in areas that are kind of the usual suspects, right? SIP Area 13, education, 42 new graduate programs total. Mixture of masters and doctoral, right? The masters are in blue, the doctoral are in red. Engineering is another area with a lot of activity, 29 new programs over the past decade. Health professions far outstrip everyone else. I mean, by a factor of 2 or 3 or more, with 112 new programs created in the past 10 years. The business area also has quite a few at 48. And then from there we go down and most things are kind of in a line. Biomedical sciences at 19 and psychology at 20 has seen a fair amount of activity. And then the rest are just kind of scattered throughout the matrix there. But what you can see is that activity is not constant across the inventory. There are certain areas that are much hotter than others where there's just a lot more churn and activity going on. So that's the new programs. Now the next chart there on page 15 at the top shows the contrast between new programs and phased out programs. It's not always apparent to us because we staff, and I imagine you folks at institutions, tend to be a little bit more focused on what's coming your way rather than what you're dropping off to the side and leaving behind you. So I think we all tend to focus a lot more on the creation of new programs. But when you look at this chart, you can see that things are actually fairly balanced in the program inventory, in the sense that there's not too much of a discrepancy, certainly when you average it over a 5 or a 10-year period, between the amount of programs that are created and the programs that are phased out and dropped away. For instance, 2016 saw the most overall activity with kind of a big outlier in terms of programs phased out. That's kind of out of proportion to many of the rest. But then up at the top, you can see that the new programs, it follows a sine curve there, a little bit of a wave, but it doesn't have the huge jumps and changes that we see in terms of the phase-outs, right? And that's, I think, kind of to be expected, because institutions are planning their new programs, they're looking ahead, and they're doing strategic planning. And so that's going to be occurring, I think, on a much more regular basis. And phase-outs are more of a pragmatic thing. You phase a program out when you just see that it's not working, when the discipline that it represented is now becoming obsolete for some reason, or the discipline is moving in a whole new direction, and so you're going to phase that program out and start something new. You're responding to certain contingent circumstances when you phase programs out. But creating new ones is part of a pattern where you're looking ahead. So I think this kind of bears out what we would expect and even hope to see in terms of phase-outs and new programs created. And the third chart at the bottom of page 15 shows credit hour changes. And again, you can see this chart is intended to show you how the increases and the decreases either match up and balance out, or in some cases don't. But you can see that in many cases, there's at least some parity, right? When institutions are considering credit hour changes, they're both looking at ways to make things tighter for students, to get students through more quickly, to make the program leaner and more efficient. And then when it comes time to add credit hours, then most often I find that you're responding to changes in the discipline, often to changes from national licensing, accrediting bodies, or professional associations that are telling you that there's new content in your discipline and you need to respond to that by adding courses or adding content, maybe adding new external learning experiences, for example. Okay, the last one I wanted to show you is on the next page, page 16, and it shows you in more detail then how these credit hour changes break out according to SIP. And once again, we see the usual discipline areas as the usual suspects. Education and engineering have a great deal of activity. Health professions, allied health, SIP 51, a great deal of activity. Biomedical sciences, 26, a good deal of activity. And then the rest of it's spread out fairly even amongst the other SIP codes. So from these charts, we can see a couple of things, and one of those things that jumps out right away is we can see which discipline areas have the most churn and the most activity in the higher education realm over the past 10 years, right? There's a big push for additional education programs to bolster our K-12 sector, particularly out further away from the main population centers. You'll see a lot of activity out there as programs try to get, particularly those master's and doctoral education programs that can serve their local education service centers and their local school districts. In 51, we've seen a big rise in allied health programs. A lot of programs are moving in their discipline from the master's level accreditation or licensure to the doctoral level accreditation or licensure, and that's going to bring a lot of change and a lot of churn as well. Are there any questions about this information? Yes. Dina.
For the phased-out programs, could you explain the 2011 318? It seems like really...
That's a typo.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, that's a typo there on 2011. It says 318, which is way out of proportion, and that bar should be going right off the page, shouldn't it? Yeah, sorry about that. We'll get that corrected, and we'll send out a corrected chart to everyone through email. Yeah, Sarah.
Could you comment on, it looks like there's a lot of activity for SCH changes in 2019 compared to the previous years. Is there any, did you have any insight into why?
Oh, that's easy. This includes our email out to everyone and the request to give us corrections on the program inventory.
Okay, so it was solicited to look.
Yeah, so if we had gone back as far as, I can't remember if it was either 2009 or 2010, we did something very similar at that time. You'd see another big, long bar for that year. And we did it for a similar reason, because around that time we were getting ready to deal with the national SIP code update once again. Okay, thank you.
I think actually I had also kind of a similar thing going back to the phased out. So was there something particularly in 2016 with the large number of phased out master's programs?
That one struck me as a little odd too, and what I suspect is the case, and I don't know for sure, but my best guess about this, sort of an educated guess, is that in 2010, I believe it was, here at AQW, we modified the low-producing programs process, which created quite a bit of activity and some consternation. Over the next several years, a lot of programs were marked for phase-out, and I suspect that because a lot of those programs had something like either a 5-year, a 4-year, or a 3-year phase-out behind them, and I bet a lot of those came due in 2016. I think that's what happened there. I'll look further into it, though, and see if I can find something more definitive. Yeah, for the new and phased out. Yeah, thank you. We'll recheck all those numbers and send you out a corrected graph. Thank you for noticing that, Devonna. Anything else? Great, thank you.
Okay, so the next few items on the agenda are a result of, I guess, discussions that we had at previous meetings and topics that members wanted to discuss. And so our first topic is a presentation on current practices for graduate programs identifying marketable skills. And so we want to thank our volunteers, Claire and Thomas also, Kruger volunteered, but he wasn't able to join us, and I think Jennifer is going to discuss his slide. So thank you all for contributing to this conversation. I think this, just the context, so we all know in 2020 we are to post marketable skills for our graduate programs, and so I think there was sort of suggestions that maybe we could hear what some others are doing, and then we could also chime in from our institutions as we all try to develop our practices. Okay, Claire, we'll start.
Okay, thank you. So, so first of all, a little bit about the University of North Texas Health Science Center. And one of the, so what I have on this slide is our vision, which is around one university defining and producing the providers of the future. And so the approach that we used is really basically a one university approach instead of a program by program. And we did that partially because one of the goals over the last few years at the Health Science Center is that we move out of the siloed schools and colleges and into more cross school and college activities. And so what you see on the left is so we're all graduate programs. It's just a listing of our professional programs. We have osteopathic medicine. We have a new allopathic medical school in collaboration with TCU that is accepting the first class of students in about a month. We have pharmacy that's fairly new, physical therapy, physician assistant, public health, and healthcare administration. We also have some research-intensive programs in biomedical sciences and in public health. So using that kind of as the context, we started with a group that, so with this vision of the provider of the future, the question that my team had in working with the schools and colleges was, okay, what does the provider of the future look like? And so we came together in several sessions and created 6 characteristics of the provider of the future. At the same time, we were also developing marketable skills. And the Marketable Skills Initiative was led by our student affairs, but it was also in collaboration with the deans of the schools and colleges and my team, which is academic affairs. So as you can see on the left, when we put our characteristics of the provider of the future, and then along came our marketable skills, and we mapped them, and we figured out we're really talking about the same thing here. And so starting at the top, collaborative and team-oriented mapped nicely to our marketable skill of ability to work in a team. The second characteristic was practices proactively to prevent adverse events. That's related to our Institute for Patient Safety and that initiative, and it relates nicely to the problem-solving marketable skill. The continuous learner is something that we feel is really important, particularly for those individuals going into health professions, and that mapped nicely to professionalism and leadership. Emotionally intelligent is one of our initiatives that we started 2 years ago now and maps nicely to interpersonal skills. And then competent in the application of knowledge and skills is something that, again, maps to problem solving. And then the last, respects and empowers people, maps nicely to communication and interpersonal skills. So this work was done last fall. And the next step in this work was, okay, now that you have these, how are we going to assess those? How are we going to know if we're really creating providers of the future with these marketable skills? So our assessment methods, and these are still under development. Some are discipline-specific and some are university-wide. So all of our clinical programs assess students through clinical education, the clerkship, and the internships, and assess such attributes as communication. We use an emotional intelligence inventory called the EQI that currently 2 of our schools and colleges, all students are being assessed, and this coming year, all students within the institution will be assessed. They'll take this assessment and then they'll get feedback on what are their strong areas, what are their areas for improvement, and then throughout the curriculum, we help them develop in those areas. We also use what's called OSCEs, or objective structured clinical exams, which evaluate students on communication and problem-solving skills. We have a simulation lab that there the emphasis is more on team-based care and how students work together in teams. And then lastly, licensure exams are important just because if the students don't pass the licensure exams, then they can't use their marketable skills in their discipline. So the last part of this, and I don't have a slide to show it, is these are really evolving areas. So what we're learning now is, because we're in the process of developing our QEP, and we just had from our president the strategic plan for 2020, we're going to need to modify these and tweak them a little bit. And for example, our QEP is on student well-being, and really with a focus on coping skills, and so that will need to be added as a marketable skill. Our strategic plan deals with entrepreneurship and having students understand entrepreneurship as they move into whatever their career may be. And so that's going to need to be added to our characteristics and marketable skills. So we see it as an ongoing process, and we're kind of excited about the way we're dealing with it, which is university-wide versus program by program. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So I think we will go to the next presentation, and then we can take questions.
All right, so I will share a little bit of information on behalf of Dr. Kruger, who couldn't join us today. So included in your email packets were several different sample documents. He wanted to share information at the program or course level to show how they were mapping across the MBA program, and then doing alignment within the courses, and then down to the syllabi and how the students were demonstrating those skill sets. So there were several items that were included in your packet. This document shows the overall marketable skills and objectives for the MBA program. In addition, one of the other documents was the rubrics that was showing the traits and then also the levels of demonstration that a student could show, and that they were applying them across the courses. He also included the assessment map to show in which courses those skills would be introduced, enhanced, or further emphasized, and then assessed. And so they had created a full construct map across their curriculum for the MBA program. He also included samples of a syllabus of the type of assignments or student artifacts and discussions that would emphasize and build upon those skills for students, so that they could have from an individual class session all the way through an entire program level of where those skills were developed and then at what level the student had obtained them. So it's stacking learning outcomes to become marketable skills at the higher level. But unfortunately, he couldn't join us today to talk a little bit more about it, but I'm sure you could reach out if you had further questions.
Okay, so do we have questions for Claire or others who maybe want to share what they are doing and perhaps where they are in their process?
I really enjoyed the contrast between those two different approaches. And I know there's going to be no answer to this question, James or Jennifer, but there's distinctly different things that we saw in those presentations. For example, the emphasis on soft skills as opposed to an emphasis on discipline-specific skills. And so I'm wondering, where do we want to fall on that? Because in your case, those so-called soft skills would apply to every single one of your professional programs as well as your research programs. But there's no discipline-specific content knowledge that you were talking about. In this case, the business one, it was all about, business understanding and so on. So I'm just curious where we want to fall as we ask our programs to go through this exercise.
One of the things I like about what's in the Kingsville, particularly this page 23, with sort of the graphic with the circle in the center and then the blocks around it, that's something I think is true of every program, right? Every program is going to be imparting some more global skills, widely applicable, you know, the ability to think critically, the ability to gather in information and data and synthesize it into something meaningful. Those kind of broad skills are, you know, especially the critical thinking type stuff, is part of the strength of graduate education, where students get a chance to grapple with things in much greater detail, to generate their own data and their own research. So I really like, that's what I like about this Kingsville approach, is that it recognizes that for each discipline there's going to be some specific skills that are particular to that particular area, to that particular program, but that it's going to share a bunch of more, a number of more global skills with either other programs in its college or school more generally, or even more generally, just other graduate programs that emphasize things like critical thinking, data gathering, data evaluation.
I too agree that I think these, the approaches were quite different but very informative. I have a question for Claire. So could you talk about the process that the institution as a whole worked to come up with these, to agree on various programs, agree to come up with these, this list of skills and the mapping? And do you either imagine, or maybe it's already been done, that so is the posting then going to be on the at the university kind of wide site rather than in the programs, and maybe they'll have links to that one site?
To answer the first question, let's see, the process. So my team is academic and faculty affairs, and so I have the, you know, the Learning Center, the library, the interprofessional education program, the simulation lab, the anatomy program. I have all programs that go across schools and colleges, and so I led this effort on our team, and we brainstormed, and then we took it to the deans of the schools and colleges, and got the buy-in from them, and we went through several iterations, to be honest. When we started out, our, you know, we have this quote, provider of the future, but we had 2 schools and colleges that said, our graduates aren't going to be providers of the future. And so we had to work through that. That was public health and the graduate school. We worked through that with our characteristics and got them pretty acceptable to everyone. And then as we added the marketable skills, again, our team, my team worked with student affairs team, and then we collectively took it to the deans of the schools and colleges. I think as far as how we will present, so one of the next steps that we will do is to map the assessment methods, because as I said, we have some discipline-specific assessment. So communication is assessed both discipline-specific and in a broader sense, and so we will map that. As far as how we will present it, I think we will present it probably university-wide, but there may be some discipline-specific components. I do think in our characteristics, I appreciate what Mark was saying, is we built in that all students have to be competent in their discipline. And that was kind of the foundation of what we built this on. And we felt that was really important to our characteristics, because if they're not competent in their discipline, then they're not going to be successful. So that was a very important part.
I just wanted to add something to this. Even when I was looking at it, I saw that as, it's very interesting from 2 different places. It looks different, but I had a different take on it. When I was looking at it, pretty much reflects the same if you look at both the documents. It starts out with marketable, skills. We are talking about communication, and you'll take a look at the MBA marketable skills and objectives. The first line is also communication for them. And then again, prevention, problem solving. It's spelled out much more in depth and detail, whereas the other one, what Claire was presenting, is like broad strokes. but all the same points are being covered in this as well, but just being said a little differently, that's all.
So my name is Ambika Mathur, as said. I'm at UTSA. I've been there for about 3 months as a graduate school dean. Prior to that, I was at Wayne State University in Michigan. And 6 years ago, actually, the NIH had a RFA for a grant called Broadening Experiences in Scientific Training, which was to expose students to careers outside of academia. And as part of that, we had to have the transferable skills, which could be used across the various industries. And rather than using the term soft skills, we used transferable because that was just, it made it easier for people to get it and to increase buy-in. And as part of that, at the same time, Council of Graduate Schools, the National Postdoctoral Association, the National Academy of Sciences had come up with this skill set that doctoral students and postdocs should have. And these mapped really well with what Claire just put forward and the other one from Kingsville. But those were almost the same kinds of competencies that were being looked at. And so we had received one of these grants from the NIH, and we created this set of professional development activities, which were more inclusive of everything. It was across the institution. We had about 75 PhD programs across the medical school, engineering, pretty much in the name it, we have it. And so it worked as almost like a core curriculum kind of a thing. And then the electives were for each college or program to add on the skill sets as needed. So it became a very comprehensive list. But as the graduate school, we put out this core. And so we had workshops and seminars and all across these. And one of the questions was, how are we going to demonstrate the acquisition of these competencies by students? So we borrowed from industry. And now what's happening in the undergraduate world, which was to have credentialing, micro-credentialing. So we worked with a company, and we had Wayne State authorized badges so that the student attending a workshop in a certain competency could acquire an electronic badge based on, at the end of the seminar, the workshop, there were a series of questions, and they had to answer them. The panelists then graded them, and on the basis of that, they were issued that credential. These micro-credentials could then be either put into an electronic portfolio, and they could also be mounted on professional social media sites like LinkedIn, so that future employers can see that. So it, either as a single badge or as a collection. So that was one of the things that was very useful to demonstrate the acquisition of the skill, in addition to those competencies that are required by the discipline, which have different ways of being presented. So I just wanted to share that as something that is very easily, I shouldn't say easily, but that is something that's adaptable.
Hi.
This has been a very interesting conversation, and thank you for your presentations and for your additions. To build on that, I guess from the perspective of UTEP, something that we have learned, and I love that you brought up the word transferable, because the word transfer is very important in my mind in including the student in the conversation about what these skills look like for them, so that they can articulate what exactly it is they are transferring into a different context. If they're able to articulate, not just receive these skills and have them, but explain how these skills transfer precisely, I think that we will be more successful in getting them to see a bigger picture and more avenues for their work. So one of the things in concrete terms that we are trying to implement at UTEP is an emphasis on the IDP, the individualized development plans, not just for students in the sciences, but also for students in social sciences and humanities, albeit it'll be modified, it'll be different, with the idea of incorporating a component of reflexivity from the student's perspective. So I love this. I would really like to look into the EQ test. I don't know what, I'm just kind of intrigued by that. And I like the inclusion of ethical, sustainable, cultural, and global in the MBA, because that is kind of an ongoing reflexivity that I think at UTEP we try to foster in our students.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that one of the things that I find interesting and laudable about your work here, Claire, the work of your institution, is trying to get at some things that are pretty hard to get at sometimes. You know, emotional intelligence and empathy, the stuff you're trying to measure with that EQI, that's not always easy to get at, and yet it's really important, especially given the healthcare emphasis of your particular slate of programs. I wanted to ask you, Claire, when you were giving guidance out to the different group, you know, colleges and schools or even individual departments, how much did you try to put guardrails on this? Like, did you say, okay, I want you to come up with only this number or fewer of skills? And did you say, I really want these to be more global and transferable and not discipline specific? Or did you say you can come up with some that are discipline specific and a mix? Or what kind of boundaries did you put on it for the working groups?
So we had some, I guess one of the first steps was truly a brainstorming, but with the goal that we would come up with like no more than 5 or 6. And so what we found though in the brainstorming is a lot of things we condensed together. And so that worked really well. The other thing I didn't share is in developing the marketable skills, we did a lot of talking with our employers and finding out from the employer perspective, what did they expect in the people that they were hiring. And that was very, I think, informative to both our characteristics and our marketable skills.
Does your institution form and utilize I guess I'd say specific bodies? In other words, for different programs or schools or colleges, do you have a set and ready to go group of industry employers? Do you have like industry advisory committees or groups? Or is this a little more ad hoc and each individual department knows where most of its graduates go and they just reach out to those employers individually?
So the answer to that is actually both, because some of our departments do have advisory committees of which we did tap into. For example, our healthcare administration program. The other thing that we did, our president was going around and talking to health systems, and so we used the major health systems in Tarrant County and talked to them as far as expectations, particularly in the clinical arena.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or would like to share some of what they're doing on their campus?
I have one last comment. I just want to say that we're also discussing this concept of badging. And I have to admit, I'm kind of the last person to be convinced of how great this is. But I think we will be heading in that direction. So there's a lot of interest from both students, faculty, and staff as far as having some kind of what you refer to as micro-credentialing or badging system. So
the employers really like it because they have evidence that.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, thank you all for the discussion. Hopefully it's been helpful as, you know, those who are still working on it, you know, continue to build their process. So our next topic, item number 7, presentation of institutional approaches to demonstrate the value and contribution of graduate education. And so we had Mark Sheridan and Richard Berry who volunteered to start the discussion on this with presentations.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So I'm going to talk really about an approach or strategies for demonstrating value and contribution for graduate education, rather than the kind of the what you transmit, because that's going to be institutional specific. So what I try to do is to set up sort of a template for best practices, if you will, and then you can insert the appropriate information. So for example, we all know that certainly graduate education supports innovation, research, and creative creative activity that is essential for the economy, and it also helps develop the skilled workforce that we need. And so there are various metrics that can use to talk about those for each of your institutions. So the general, let's see. Sorry, Jennifer, I'm not familiar with this thing here. Okay. So general strategies approaches are going to be targeting the different audiences that you may want to talk to. You may have some internal constituents, but there's also external constituents that are important. With regard to internal constituents, I think it's important for the graduate education enterprise at the campus to play a very strong leadership role in strategic planning for graduate education and how that graduate education enterprise relates to the overall university strategic plan, and play an overall leadership role in graduate enrollment management. So I think that's an important thing to demonstrate the importance of graduate education at a university. And then it's important, I think, for internal constituents to build a whole host of different relationships that are necessary to affect a successful experience for students. Certainly, I think developing positive relationships with student affairs offices, financial aid offices, career center, counseling center, the student government organizations, as well as the marketing communication office at your university. All those are going to be important in your charge to advance the importance of graduate education. They will also be important to help with spreading the word, if you will, on campus that graduate education is a central component of the university's activity. And there's really not a whole lot of difference between relationship building and partnership building, but I look at these somewhat differently. It's important, I think, to get various players together, research offices, academic programs around the campus, centers and institutes, the library, develop relationships with those folks that you can see where there are points of contact, where there may be new opportunities to form perhaps interdisciplinary programs or to support interdisciplinary research activities. But those are going to be very good assets for advancing the importance of graduate education on your campus. I think it's also important to demonstrate the importance of graduate education on your campus by showing that graduate education has value added to the university. And so here's just a few examples of evaluated programs and services, and these are specific examples I drew from Texas Tech. So the big question is, why should you have a graduate school at a university? Again, value added helps convey the importance of that. And so you can do simple things, what I call feel-good resources to help support student travel, small grants, particularly to fields of study that don't have access traditionally to external funds to support their scholarly activities. So those are important things. And that, again, helps foster a positive attitude about graduate education on campus. Providing fellowships, and we got whole different flavors of fellowships on our campus. We also provide service to help identify funding entities outside the university, external fellowship opportunities, to find those, to help students write those, and to submit those, and then provide a whole host of academic support. And I'll give some examples of that. So we established 5 years ago when I arrived at Tech a graduate center. It's for the exclusive use of graduate students and postdocs. It's available to them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a nexus for our professional career development programs. There is a large networking space, some little offshoot corners where people have whiteboards that they can work on group activities, conference room with video conferencing capabilities, computer labs, a coffee bar, it's always stocked. And then we provide academic support services, statistical consulting service, for example, library research services, concierge services for international students, and our graduate writing center. And the Writing Center has been a really important addition for us, and it delivers program in a variety of ways to both resident and distant students through individual consultations, through various workshops, grant writing groups, graduate writing groups, thesis and dissertation boot camps, and then fellowship writing boot camps. And the subscription to these various services has increased exponentially. I think 4 years ago when I started this center, we had a half-time director. She's now full-time, and we have another full-time person, and then a whole host of consultants, graduate students from various disciplines across campus. And then, of course, there's a whole host of external constituencies that you have and ways that you can get the message across to those external constituents. Having an advisory council or advisory boards composed of alumni and friends of your program. A lot of times when talking to an external constituent, and Karen and I did this just recently when we were in DC, people don't necessarily believe the message that we're giving because we have a vested interest in that message, but a person outside the university that can talk about the value of the university to that particular person, I think carries a lot more weight. And so that's where these advisory council members and industrial board members are very important to your advocacy plan. Also engaging the local business community and the service organizations. I'll talk to anybody who will listen. So we've got really good relationships with our local development agency, Chamber of Commerce, and a number of service clubs around town. Oftentimes we'll bring students to those service organizations to talk about the research they're doing. And again, that helps engender an understanding of research and how important it is. And then we do a whole host of community outreach and engagement activities. The graduate students started a food bank, and they work closely with the community food banks, sort of as a service project. And then we have a variety of student presentations, which we all do, but what we try to do is make these public. And so different formats we have, the 3-minute thesis competition, which many of you have, and our judges are sort of our celebrity judges. We've got a weatherman, a newsman, and a person from one of the congressional district offices as our judges for the 3-minute thesis competition. And similarly, we have an Arts and Humanities Conference, and again, we engage community leaders. We've got pastors, we've got CEOs of local companies, we've got people from all across the community that come in and serve as judges for the Arts and Humanities Conference, so they get a chance to see the showcase of activities that the students are presenting. And it's anyway, in the Arts and Humanities Conference, it can be anywhere from a play to an art product to any other large number of things. And this particular conference is open to all disciplines. There's mathematicians that will come and biologists and so on who will also make presentations at the conference. And the poster competition is one I think it's probably the largest subscribed to among our students. And again, the judges from across the community come, and then the local banks will let us put up the winners of the poster competition in the banks, so that patrons of the banks for a week period of time can look at some of the research activity that's taking place at the university. We also host a number of alumni events. Your alumni are your greatest ambassadors, so keep them engaged to the maximum extent possible. And then you have to complement that with a very strategic and concerted communication and marketing effort. Variety of ways of doing that, digital marketing effort, newsletters, we all do these things. But again, you have to think about what the audience is, and so focus the type of information that you convey to that specific audience type. And then here's an example our president just started about degrees of impact, talking about faculty and student activities, our website and publications that come out from our Central Communication and Marketing Unit. And so this is just a template for kind of how to do it, and you just plug in your own information. But you can see that ultimately, it's going to be very important to folks to understand the value and importance of graduate education so they can be receptive to why we should have universities and colleges doing graduate education. Thank you.
I was glad to hear Mark go first because my approach is a little bit different. Rather than looking at a template, I thought what I'd do is talk a little bit about what we do. And it'll be interesting to see how it fits into the template, which was excellent. Communicating the values and contributions of graduate education is a challenge right now. The focus in many regional comprehensive universities, which is where I come from, is on undergraduate education. For example, at my institution recently, our academic leadership required the reading and discussion of the book, The Undergraduate Experience, focusing institutions on what matters most. And if you think back, many of you were there at the ATGS meeting a year and a half ago where Commissioner Paredes indicated that, quote, because I wrote this down in quotes, our fundamental mission is undergraduate education. While I can't disagree with that, or I won't disagree with that very vehemently, I think there is a real need to demonstrate the value and contribution of graduate education. Now, I too thought about who are we communicating this with? Who are we demonstrating this to? And for SFA and for many regional comprehensives, and probably for everybody in this room, recruitment of new graduate students is one of the primary reasons for demonstrating these things. Convincing potential students of the value of a graduate degree, especially during a strong economy, is a challenge. And I think we've all noticed when the economy's strong, enrollment tends to drop. When the economy's weak, enrollment tends to balloon. Second, we find it increasingly important to demonstrate the value and contribution of graduate programs to the institution in general, to the campus at large, if you will. And then also, it is essential that we reinforce our stewardship of place by establishing and maintaining strong connections to the local stakeholders, community leaders, and businesses, making them aware of the value and contribution of graduate education and the potential benefits available through regional collaborations. Now, at Stephen F. Austin, administration of graduate education is fairly decentralized for a number of reasons, historical and otherwise. Consequently, the responsibility for advocacy for graduate education is also spread out among a number of offices and individuals. The Office of Research and Graduate Studies administers a survey of recipients of graduate degrees from our university and compiles data on various aspects of satisfaction with the programs, employment-related questions. For example, the kind of things that the survey generates tell us that 71%, the most recent that I've been able to obtain, 71% of SFA graduate students are successfully employed in their fields. 88% of the graduate students would choose the same field. In other words, do the same thing. 87% would recommend SFA in those programs to other students. 77% of the students surveyed anticipate a promotion thanks to the new degree that they have obtained. These data are available to the campus for use in advocacy activities and materials, as well as for use in assessment, evaluation, and planning processes. In individual programs, where most of the responsibility for advocacy lies, information is gathered through a whole raft of discipline-related surveys and studies, just like at your universities, often in coordination with program reviews, with accreditation requirements, professional associations, or other discipline-based purposes, such as the Higher Education Data Services Report. The recruitment of new students on our campus is handled almost exclusively through the specific academic programs and the offices that administer them. We do very little university-wide graduate student recruiting. So the contacts with students and influencers and the information provided to them are very individualized and very focused. Information on student satisfaction, such as what I just cited, employment benefits, is combined with discipline-based information during the recruitment process. Now, communication on campus about graduate education is decentralized as well, with the responsibility, again, largely falling on the specific graduate programs to notify the campus at large of successes and achievements and opportunities of the graduate program and their students and their faculty. We do have several institutional programs that provide focus on graduate education. The annual Graduate Research Conference is probably the most important event for this purpose. The entire campus community has an opportunity to learn of the best of graduate research from all areas of the university through public oral presentation and poster presentation. In addition, many graduate programs sponsor their own graduate research and creative work showcases throughout the year. It's important that the campus community, in particular, those who are very much engaged in, quote, the undergraduate experience, understand the institutional importance of the graduate academic experience. The example of graduate research is invaluable for students and faculty members involved in the burgeoning field of undergraduate research. Connections with external stakeholders, community leaders, local businesses have grown in importance in the past 20 years. And while Stephen F. Austin has always enjoyed strong community support generally, in recent years we've intensified our efforts to communicate the value and potential benefits to the region of our graduate programs. Thinking of businesses, community interest groups, professional organizations, as well as regional workforce and service needs. We do this through some formal relationships, the local Economic Development Corporation and the Chamber of Commerce. Stephen F. Austin has representatives on the board of directors of both of these organizations, and these individuals foster contacts and relationships with various community members, organizations, businesses, and leaders. We also maintain a vast number of informal, more personal relationships with local elected officials and other community leaders. We build ad hoc networks all the time, and this is extremely important in a small community such as ours. It's important in large communities, I'm sure, as well. We've begun new programs in response to needs that arise within the region, addressing public and workforce needs. We take stewardship of place very seriously. We deliver not only data about the value of graduate education, but also tangible, valuable, real-life results that benefit the community. We've established many collaborative projects that meet the needs of the region while providing hands-on opportunities for our graduate students. The decentralized nature of graduate education administration at SFA, a result of a number of historical factors, has its advantages, has its disadvantages. Among the disadvantages are challenges in coordination and the resultant reinventions of the wheel from time to time, missed opportunities for admittedly small economies of scale. But among the advantages, the messages are delivered by those most knowledgeable and most invested in the individual programs, those most passionate about the programs. And it's through the work of these individual programs, supported by the appropriate administrative offices, that the best demonstrations of the value and contributions of graduate programs are communicated from our university.
Okay, questions?
Only an observation, Richard. I think it followed the template exactly. So, I too wrote down the commissioner's quote during that meeting, and I thought about it for a while, and I go, well, that's interesting because without research and creative activities, there's nothing to teach undergraduates. And I remember a story when I was a student at Berkeley. A Nobel laureate was giving an address, and he said, with the progression of new and the creation of new knowledge, 50% of what you've learned here the last 4 years have proved to be incorrect. The problem is we don't know which 50%. And so, you know, you can't rely on undergraduate education. So.
And it can be for Mark or for anybody, but you brought up the alumni as an important group to stay in touch with, and we've found that to be very challenging at the graduate level. Do you have any suggestions, or do you have any tips? Or, I mean, I imagine Texas Tech is very good at keeping in touch with alumni for different reasons, but any ideas that you can share?
It's not easy. I mean, the fact that we've got 40,000 graduate alumni that are in our database makes it a little easier because we can get a hold of those.
So there, you have 40,000 in a database?
Yeah.
That's already huge.
It takes a lot of time and patience and concerted effort to build the network of alumni. And so I started small within Texas, and then we did a map of the United States where our pockets of alumni are to try to figure out where there's a critical mass of people that we can try to energize. And we haven't gone so far as to formalize, groups like the undergraduates have done. And the challenges are oftentimes a graduate student, at least our development folks, think that they tend to affiliate more with their undergraduate institution than their graduate institution. But we've turned the corner on that, especially with international graduate students. When I go to conferences to give talks in my area, I invariably will meet with alums that are in that area, Bangkok or Tokyo or Beijing or whatever, and they're delighted to meet with us. And always organize an activity when I'm there for the other alums. And so they enjoy the opportunity to get together and share stories. And so it's a neat opportunity. So we've used the alumni networking groups for a couple things, not only just to keep each other in touch, to help with expanding our advocacy network, but also with our recruiting activities. So wherever we have a recruiting event, we often will have several alums that will come and help us out there. So it just takes time.
I might add just a word about that again, because we're a very different kind of institution. We have 13,000 students, about 3,000 graduate students enrolled. But though I have to be careful to stay off my soapbox about this, so just tell me to shut up when you've heard enough. But for me, even at the undergraduate level, but certainly at the graduate level, it's all about the discipline. It's about the program. And the university as an institution, and the graduate dean's office, at least at our institution, is not going to successfully recruit graduate students for the music program. The people who are going to do that are the music professors, are the heads of those programs, and likewise, following up with alums from those programs is most successfully done at our institution by those programs themselves. And so we have these sort of informally designated, or sometimes undesignated, folks in every program who sort of keep up with what happened to everybody. Now, the problem is it's informal, and that person dies, or that person retires, or that person moves along, and somebody else has got to pick it up. And I understand what the problems are with that. It remains that, in my judgment, is the most effective way to deal with alums, especially at the graduate level. Now, if you let me talk long enough, I'll start talking about how that applies to undergraduate, and that's not what we're here for.
So I wanted to add a few things to the comments of Rick and Mark. One, I guess, in terms of the marketing that you were sort of talking about. And so several years ago, first of all, we're large, but we actually are very decentralized in terms of graduate education. And so I did a survey of our doctoral programs, and that was asking the question about what do they see as sort of the major barriers in attracting the top students. And actually, the number one thing was that we had not created university branding around graduate education. And so while they were doing things at college levels and program levels, they felt that we needed to invest resources in also marketing graduate education. And I guess, trying to really become a destination, so that there are some people who might say they want to go to a university, and then they actually search for the people they want to work with. And then, of course, there's, of course, the one we're familiar with where you know who you want to work with, and that leads you to a place. And so we've been, then trying to work to try to determine what that looks like, from an investment perspective and stuff like that, because also we did not have really a communications group within our unit because we had sort of centralized that under the provost. And so we're working, toward trying to build up that. So that was sort of interesting, actually. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was sort of the communication with alumni, because you were asking, about, how do you go about things? And so we're not, we don't have a database, actually. And we started 2 years ago through our engagement in the Council of Graduate Schools project on, the career pathways to the PhD. And so we are building the database because we started doing the surveys, and I was like, okay, so we're getting now contacts, so we need to do something with this. So we actually are working with our IT group to try to start to build a database. And so I think we started by just getting contact information from our alumni association in terms of what they had, and of course the information that we had in the student information system as their last contact. And then based, when we hear back, then we sort of are validating that. And I think this year we're planning to invest in maybe, using a service to help us do something, and then reaching out to the faculty and essentially asking them to provide us the contact on the one that they have. And so, that's a process because, of course, it'll take about 6 months before, some people reply, so. But we're going to use that to try to then build it, and then we're going to couple that with, we're trying to develop now the strategy to start to reach out to them, because actually our, alumni association really does not strategically try to market to the graduate student graduates. Right? Because a lot of times, we have a brand that's built a lot initially around the undergraduate experience. And so they haven't really yet done a lot of that. So that's some of the things that we're trying to lead, and then hopefully they'll come along as partners in that.
Well, and you're right. I mean, one thing is to have the database, but then also engaging in meaningful communication. For example, when you don't have a football team that is winning or something. I don't know. That's,
So I had a question for the group. So, with this trend towards taking the graduate piece out of university commencements, is that a growing trend around Texas, or are we not seeing that yet?
We've had a big debate about this on our campus, because up till the present, the graduate school has its own commencement, and then the other commencements are collections of other colleges on campus. One of the things that we did talk about is the advantages of perhaps actually integrating the graduate commencement with the undergraduate commencement, so that the audience members can see that happens, right? That there is an important, so I'm actually an advocate for that. But the logistics are complicated. We're trying to move do you guys do your graduations in the football stadium, or where do you guys do? Okay. We were thinking about having one large commencement rather than 6 smaller ones. But
We're just going the other way. So we have, actually, like this May, we had 8 commencements. We give diplomas at the commencement, and every student walks across the stage. And so we would do hooding. So like in May, we have kind of almost college-wide, but in August, it's multiple. And so we were advocating to pull out, and we ended up deciding to do doctoral, because if we pull the master's out, then now we have 1 or 2 commencements that we would have to have. So we were going to start this August with a doctoral only, but we didn't get all the details determined in time, and so we're starting in December. And so we'll try doing a doctoral one, and then we'll do undergraduate and master's, continue to kind of do those that way.
Our school's much smaller than A&M and UT, but what our grad programs do is each college has their own hooding ceremony the evening before or a couple days before. And then graduations, such as this August, it'll be small, so we'll do undergrad, grad, and doc together. but during the larger ones in May, we'll split them up so that it may be 3 colleges in the morning and 2 colleges in the afternoon, but each ceremony has undergrad, grad, and doctoral.
Any other discussion about the value and sort of framing that? Okay, well, thank you both. And so now our last topic before lunch, I think, so a presentation of institutional approaches to identify and support diverse career pathways for graduate students. And so Mark and then Natalie Lundstein.
Hello.
In the back? Okay.
I'm just going to sit here if that's all right. So, hello, I'm Natalie Lundstein. I am the delegate for Andrew Zinn, who is our Dean of Graduate Studies. And I'm going to talk to you today from the perspective of an institution that is purely graduate and medical, and a graduate school that only supports PhDs. We have a School of Health Professions. We have a, oh, thank you. And we have a medical school. But I would say 95% of my time, I serve all, but 95% of my time is in the graduate school with PhDs and postdocs as well. So the first thing I want to do is just show you some numbers. These do not add up. They are separate entities, these numbers. And the most important is to look that 8% of our PhDs go tenure track. So when I read something that says supporting diverse pathways, I immediately and automatically assume that that's supporting PhDs going beyond the tenure track. But what's important to know about our cohort too is that 75% of our graduate students will go on to some kind of research. But then that leaves a 33% chunk that goes on to other position types. And this word cloud is on our website, our external facing website, to show the kind of general areas that our biomedical scientists go into. And I recognize that where I am now, I'm very lucky because it's a niche. There are approximately 15 broad career areas that biomedical scientists can go into. So it helps in helping them identify the kind of tracks they might go into. But I want to bounce back to the recent talk about alumni and say that one of the most powerful things you can do with students at any level, undergrad up through grad and postdoc, is to be able to say, where have people like you gone on to successful work, to happy work, to career satisfaction? And as you all know, it's really been only the last 5 to 10 years where there has been a great diversity for PhDs in particular in careers. But there have always been people out there in diverse careers beyond academia, and it really helps, I think, to norm and frame that and see, someone else with a PhD in neuroscience is working at, and this is a true story, one of our alums is working for 7-Eleven in charge of their consumer behavior section. So basically, she helps trick you into buying hot dogs and things at the checkout. So what has really driven us, and Ambika, I'm so happy you're in Texas now, because when she is one of the leaders in terms of scientific career diversity and pathways, because these BEST grants that she received, one of which she received at Wayne State from the NIH, it stands for Broadening Experiences in Scientific Training. Is that, yeah, okay. So it's, the word broadening is in there, and the institutions that have received these awards and created programming, it's cascaded down across the United States and even expanded beyond science. So we also receive directives when we receive grants that say we must expose our students to diverse pathways. We must provide training for them to in a range of careers, and that we need to use individual development plans. We use AAAS's My IDP, but for those of you who work with humanities and social sciences, there's a recently invented equivalent called Imagine PhD, and I'll tell you more about that when I get through this. But basically that, ensured that we were going to create these kind of resources, and they've come out of the graduate school. My position was created 5 years ago, and it's taken about 5 years for there to be that sea change in culture and attitude, and Mark even mentioned the sort of grassroots with building alumni. So I can speak from that 5-year vantage point and say that it really can work, even with just one person in a graduate school, but specifically managed on this topic. So I just want to talk, one thing, my last point, is that some of these transferable area topics, we had received a couple supplemental scientific grants through the NSF, through the NIH, to pilot some of these programs, like teaching our graduate students project management, teaching them about grant writing. And we frame that in, here are some alumni coming back to talk to you about how they use project management or grant writing in their jobs, even if their jobs are not specifically about that. So sneaking in the diverse pathways, even when we're teaching the transferable skills. So one of the most important things, I think everyone has talked about a lot of these topics already, but being able to create connections with alumni. And we are in Dallas, which is not big pharma. There's not even little pharma. But scientists go so many places that aren't just on the bench industry. Science writing, science policy, working for 7-Eleven in the creepy consumer behavior. So there's lots of places that our alumni can go. But what has been amazing in getting our alumni connected to us is the growth in student and postdoc organizations that I have ended up supervising. Remember, we don't have an undergraduate campus. We don't really have a student activities office. We don't have a lot of clubs or activities for grad students in particular. The medical students do, but that's another story. When I started, there were 2 clubs, a postdoc club and a grad student club focused on career pathways. And now we have 12. And they sort of are self-sustaining. Again, as one person in the graduate school trying to puppet master a lot of this, it really helps if there's initiative from the students, and I can support them and advise them. But they bring the initiative to me. So we have a group, and scientists love acronyms, so we have FLIP, Future Leaders in Pedagogy, and they're focused on undergraduate teaching careers. We have a consulting club, a science policy club, a biotech club. And I want to talk just very briefly about our consulting club, because it was founded 5 years ago, around about the time I started, and the alumni of that club will come back and support their club because it gives them a reason and a hook to come back to campus. Our students have run a case competition and invited students from all of your campuses and all over the region to come. And our development office got wind of this and got very excited. And they thought, oh, your grad school alumni have money and work in consulting firms. So that has borne some fruit too. So it's just part of a bigger national trend of people in graduate schools, perhaps in career centers, but perhaps in academic departments who are focused specifically on career and professional development for graduate students. And in your packet is a handout from the Graduate Career Consortium. I'm just going to put in a plug for that because I'm going to be president next year, and I think a lot of your campuses have someone who is a member of our group. But for example, the BEST grants, when they were getting started, when they were running, when they were creating their programs, they mostly came to our conference and the National Postdoc Association to share and collaborate. So the diverse career pathways will depend on what your population is, what disciplines you have, and a lot will come from the academic departments. But know that there are resources out there, particularly through the GCC, the Graduate Career Consortium, where you don't have to recreate the wheel. And I will just say for my campus, which is very specific, very science, and located in a specific regional area, we've made the best of not having a lot, and a lot of that has come from the initiative of the students, and then of course the support of my dean in funding this and my position. And that's all.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, that data that you have shown regarding Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences PhD career outcomes, talking about 75% non-faculty research. Are these postdocs, or what are they?
No, this is graduate students. Yeah. So they're in research positions. Some will become postdocs, but some will go on to what is traditionally referred to as industry, bench scientist jobs.
Bench science. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, I'm going to follow sort of the general model again as I go through this. And for our university, we've got, I think, 70 doctoral programs, over 100 master's programs in STEM fields, humanities and social sciences, and the fine arts fields. When I was doing my PhD, like some of us have been around a while, probably 95% of the students getting doctoral degrees went into academia. And of course, the landscape has changed dramatically since then. The survey of earned doctorates from NSF tells us that about 2/3 of doctoral recipients are going into fields or into career paths outside of academia. And our exit survey data tell us the same thing. About 2/3 of our PhD students are getting jobs outside of academia. It's particularly concerning in the humanities and to some extent the social sciences because, again, according to the last NSF data, about 90% of the PhD recipients in those fields were attempting to go into academia. And the simple fact is there's not enough capacity for those students to continue to get positions in academia. And so that's where we have a very large challenge for us as we move forward for the folks outside of STEM disciplines to be able to take those transferable skills that they have in the humanities and social sciences and find employment in other sectors of the economy. My approach is, again, one about trying to expand visions of career options for students and what we can do to do that. And then the other is to adjust faculty culture a little bit, and I'll talk about why that's important in a minute. So with regard to the expanding career visions and preparing students, again, very similar to what you're doing, Natalie, with regard to a comprehensive professional career development program. A good part of that effort is aimed at career development, career workshops, and career preparation discussions, again, using our alums, our advisory council members to have panel discussions with our students to talk about, oh, I got a PhD in biochemistry, but now I'm working in the pharmaceutical industry, or I got a PhD in anthropology, and now I'm working. So there's a lot of things that are very important for those students to hear and to see. The challenge that we've seen sometimes, though, is the resistance from faculty, because faculty still measure success by the placement of their doctoral students in R1 universities, and so we got to talk about that a little bit. The other thing is working closely with students to chart their course. Again, talking about the individual development plan. At our university, every PhD student has to have an annual report filed by their advisor. Not all have to undergo the IDP, the NSF and IH supported students do. But we're encouraging that so that the faculty will have discussions with their students about what other kinds of things they should be doing to complement their experience to provide the skill sets, but also expose them to the vision that may be necessary to help chart their course. And then we got a couple things that we've started on campus to help with certain areas, especially in the humanities and the fine arts. We have a humanities center which fosters what the folks in humanities call humanities thinking across disciplines, and it's designed to help explore challenges and issues and to host workshops for both faculty and students, especially for students, to talk about interdisciplinary approaches that can be woven into their scholarly activity. And just this last year, we got some money from a local foundation, the CH Foundation, to launch an exploratory program to form teams of non-STEM and STEM faculty and students to form interdisciplinary teams so they can, it gives a sense of how team-oriented scholarly activity works and helps develop the skill sets among the non-STEM students so that they can broaden their vision of career options and have the skill sets they need to enter those sectors of the economy. We also track very carefully what the students are doing through exit surveys, alumni surveys, and it's embedded in our program review process. And it's more than just following where they go, but it's actually asking programs during the program review process to talk about what they're doing in terms of expanding visions of career options. What are they doing in terms of sitting down with their students and helping them chart their course through their annual reviews or the IDPs if they're using those in those programs. And so we're holding them accountable for the activity at the program review time. The biggest, I think, hurdle is the faculty. Most of us were trained in this master apprentice model where we were trained to replace our mentor and carry forward the creation of new knowledge. The challenge, however, is many faculty view success very narrowly. And so it's important that we begin to recalibrate the notion of success, because we saw it in these program reviews consistently. Programs were considering their program to be successful by the number of PhD students that they're placing in R1 universities. And so again, that's an issue that we're going to have to work on the faculty for. Again, one of my colleagues, going back to that anthropology example, 20 years later, he still has not talked to that PhD student who took that job at Google because he thought she sold out. And she makes 10 times what he does. And of course, it's also important to promote cross-fertilization and maybe reinvent how we do research and scholarly activity from a sort of a isolation model to a sort of a team approach to mirror more what happens outside of academia, especially in business and engineering and so on. So how do we go about doing that? We created the series of monthly gatherings of graduate faculty we call Greater Roundtables, where we sit and we discuss these issues. And so there's an opportunity for us to try to, again, broaden in the minds of faculty the options, the career options, but also talk about other issues related to the graduate education experience. And this has been very fruitful to get the graduate faculty together at these monthly meetings. And here's an example of a topic. Mental health is a serious issue. There was a survey done, again, from my alma mater. 6 out of 10 students, PhD students at Berkeley, self-reported anxiety or depression. And so they studied in a follow-up survey what were some of the underlying causes, and I think about 4 or 5 of the 10 underlying causes had to do with advisor-advisee relationships. So being able to talk to faculty about the importance of that relationship, the role they play in that relationship is something that we're continuing to do, again, through these Rater roundtables. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Questions?
So this is actually for either Mark or Natalie or anybody else. Do either of you have industry internships for your graduate students?
Mostly, we do have internships in several fields, engineering mostly, but also our MPA program. Those are the ones that come to mind most.
Yes, I'm excited to report that our first official one just happened this week. And a bioinformatics PhD is going to Uber for the summer, and he's going to make $9,000 a month. I'm not kidding. But his PIs are supportive of this because it does relate to his degree. He's also an international student, and it works with his optional professional training. It will never be this easy again, but it is laying the groundwork for future students, and they'll probably have to go away, and they will have to stop out as a student. But we're making it work if it relates to academia. I don't know what's going to happen when someone wants to go to Uber and it doesn't relate. So. Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword, though, with time to degree and potentially stop out. But again, in the engineering fields, especially at the master's level, that's been incredibly important. So we've got a number of formal arrangements with many companies, especially in Dallas area, for engineering master's students for internships.
From the student perspective, I'll say at UT Austin there is an alternative academics listserv that's run out of the career services, and I found that really helpful to have a centralized place where all of these things are available. We don't have anything quite as comprehensive as Texas Tech's graduate or postdoc only center. But I think the existence of a listserv that's actually distributed by a staff member gives alternative academic career paths some legitimacy from an institutional perspective, right? That's saying like this is an okay thing to think outside of the traditional R1 faculty. So I'll say that's been really helpful for me.
I would like to ask Natalie or anyone else if the career guidance and the tools available include things like federal service jobs, state service jobs. And I ask because I remember when I was finishing up a couple of decades ago, I ended up applying not only to a number of state jobs, which obviously I ended up getting one, but I applied for a number of federal jobs as well, including to the Foreign Service, i.e. the Diplomatic Corps. And all of those processes were completely up to me. No one at the Student Center where I was knew anything about that or how to go about that. I had to do all that research on my own. How does it look now?
The answer is yes. And remember that no one person, no one faculty member, no one career advisor is going to know everything about every job area, but alumni, ding, 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 will do. So 2 of our alums came back to campus just a few weeks ago. One was in town for a wedding, so we snapped up her and flew another one back who was a presidential management fellow. And they were recorded, which helps tremendously, and talked about USA jobs and what a GS-10 is. And, you know, other people could chime in the audience and you know, share their experiences, but they could talk about their own process and be a resource, and then also connect people to other alumni who might be working in the NIH, at the NSF, or even in, you know, Howard Hughes Medical Foundation, things like that. So yes, but I think students will need to be empowered and get the tools they need to seek this information out for themselves. And my go-to is always going to be people, and it's always going to be alumni, because they're going to be more likely to have the most up-to-date, in-depth information about that.
Great, thank you.
May I just add one more resource? So like Natalie, I'm going to make a plug. So the BEST program that has been alluded to, there's actually a very robust website. And for our institutions, we are 17 in the consortium, were asked to put in the resources. And we had done the same thing. We recorded a number of modules for each of these areas. And it's all posted there. So instead of reinventing wheels and, you know, coming up with your own, if you do not have the resources or the opportunity to do that, please use those resources. They are publicly available. I can share the website later. I can send it to Jennifer. But that is a really good place to use. And as part of our contract with the NIH, you know, it was supposed to be openly available. So please do use that. Going back to Mark's question about faculty buy-in, when we first were applying for the BEST grants and we surveyed our faculty, only about 25% were supportive of their students even exploring careers outside of academia. And they said, you know, if the student is looking at that, we won't even take the student in our lab or in our research area. And this went on until we were able to actually collect data on our 15,000 alumni and show where they were going, and it followed the national trends of exactly, you know, 75% exploring careers or in careers outside of academia. And the faculty kept telling us, oh, but this was not our student, until we said, okay, here's your specific data. You know, look back in your 10-year or 15-year or 25-year, and these is the same ratio. And it was the data that convinced faculty. Otherwise, they kept saying, not my student, not my student. So we, you know, data sort of converted people. There are still that 5% or 10% who are absolutely adamant, but, you know, we are always going to have that.
James, I want to add, I think in the earlier presentation I made, I talked about how important some of these relationships were. Most career services on campuses are really geared to our undergraduates. And so we were very fortunate. Our career service outfit bought in very quickly to being able to not forget the graduate population. So we've been building a database of our alums in these various sectors of the economy in various fields of study, and using those not only through our workshops and career vision in collaboration with career services, but then career services, because these folks are very generous with the time, have been using them for mock interviews and so on for various fields of study. So career services for graduate students is going to be increasingly important for folks outside of academia.
someone had asked me to just follow up a little bit on the Imagine PhD tool. And again, I want to say, following up on what Mark just said, is that if you have a career service on campus, most likely you have undergrads. But remember that some of your campuses may have a graduate-focused professional who may or may not be career services background, but the Graduate Career Consortium has people from sort of all disciplines, but 75% of our members have PhDs and may not be housed in a career center. So growing trend, and I'd love to talk with anyone more about that later. But the Graduate Career Consortium did develop the Imagine PhD tool about a year and a half ago, 13,000 registrants on it right now, including many in STEM, 90 countries. It's an incredible, beautiful tool that really was created in response to the sort of dearth of academic faculty tenure track positions, this growing growth in people like me, a growing profession focused on this, the need to help faculty take something off their plate so they can focus on research and their discipline. And it's a beautiful tool. I think I'm overusing that word, but it's got some great graphics and some good programming. And anyone who's familiar with the My IDP tool on AAAS, it's about 12 years old. So it's a little clunky and a little old. It's kind of dial up. But it's free for anyone to use, although a number of institutions like University of California System has been a great supporter. So again, if you find that it might work for your institution, maybe consider throwing some money at it later. But for now, it's free, and it's a great tool. Also, I should say there has been for a long time a website called Versatile PhD, and it was created in the 80s to provide information on the non-academic track, and it used to have to be hidden and kind of secret and under the radar, and I don't think that's the case anymore. And by the way, one of the creators and founders of Imagine PhD has just come from UCLA to UT Austin in a new job about 2 months ago, and her name's Annie Maxfield. So she's here in Texas, and one of her specialties is working with faculty and culture change. So I'm happy to do introductions to Annie, but she's lovely, and you can just email her and say, Annie, I hear you're in Texas, and I'm sure she will talk with you or come to your campus.
I have one question for Mark on the Raider roundtable. Do you get good participation in those?
It depends on the topic. And it's kind of, we use the if you feed them, they will come sort of philosophy. But there is a little bit about preaching to the choir in some cases. But sometimes there's genuine interest. And I use a sort of a stick approach, too, because if I've given the department money, they make sure they have to show up. So.
Any other comments or things like that? Okay, well, I hope you all agree with me, but I think these three, areas of presentation have been very helpful in, seeding some discussion and then giving us some, different ideas of things that are happening on the other campuses and maybe individuals to reach out to, right, as we try to advance things on our campus. So thank you all who volunteered to present. And so I think we will, with this, maybe break for lunch, and so this is an action item, so if someone would be willing to make a motion. Okay, second. Any? Oh, okay, all righty. So all those in favor of breaking for lunch? Okay, opposed? Okay, and so we will break for a half an hour, and so we will return at 12:15. And lunch is over to the right. And I think for those of you who are new, they have drinks and
Yes, drinks are in the break room. If you walk out into the main hall, head back toward the front of the building just before you get to the main lobby. There's a doorway to your right. That's our staff break room, and the staff break room has vending machines in it. The bathrooms are in the main hall, right about in the middle of the building.
you ready? Sure. Okay. Okay, well, thank you all. Hopefully you had an enjoyable lunch. I know that we could always talk to each other forever and find out what we're doing on our campuses and stuff like that. But I guess we'll go ahead and get started again. And so we will start with agenda item number 10, discussion of online graduate program data.
Yes. Thank you. So as an ongoing, as I would say, series throughout this last year, I've been coming with different information about online programs, online program approvals, and now we're starting to transition into student level data and information about activity within those programs. So today, just have a little bit of information about some of our distance education and graduate programs. This slide is just a refresher on the definitions as established in the administrative code, and you'll see on the top we have an additional category which is 100% online, and that is a category that we use here to distinguish between fully and 100% online because that was an emerging delivery mode over time that we wanted to start looking at as well. So this data is pulled from our Texas Accountability Data System, which we'll explore in the next agenda item. And this is showing semester credit hours taken online at their graduate level. This is from public universities only. And what I wanted to highlight on this is that there has been growth in the semester credit hour enrollment particularly in the master's level for online over time. This is from fall 2014 to fall 2018, and these are fall semester only. And that growth has been 40% from the numbers in fall 2014 to fall 2018, whereas face-to-face hours have decreased 12% over the same time period. So it's not an even swap out, that there's been some acceleration in the proportion of online semester credit hours taken. And this is the link to access this, so you could download this report and you can go into further detail for institution data sets as well. But the hope for fall is to look even further and identify the disciplines and look at more nuanced information about this. But this sort of gives you an appetizer to think about over the summer of the activity of semester credit hours enrolled.
So on this particular one, is online fully and 100%? Together?
Yes. So you have face-to-face, and then hybrid blended is that 50% or more, but less than 85, and then online includes anything 86% or higher.
Okay, any questions for Jennifer?
Just a quick question. Are international students able to participate in online programs from our institutions? Because I know that they can only take X number of, I think, one class per semester when they're here that is online. I just thought if anybody from Bangladesh wanted to apply for an online program, can they? Does anybody know?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but we can get that.
I think that the issues are export control. Yeah. Right. So I think I think they can be in your programs and you just have to manage if there's some export control issues. But there's...
Yeah.
But in terms of how you then might get funded from the state for them, right? Then they're like out of state, right? They're like out of state distance students, right?
There are funding implications, and to kind of recap, that there might be different criteria for international students, and we'll look into what policy information to send out.
Okay, so then are we ready for number 11? Is that our speaker back there? Yes. Okay, so this is an update on the accountability data related to graduate programs.
How's that? Oh, yes, that's working. I generally have a loud voice anyway, but I know it can be hard to hear in such a big room. Very happy to be here with all of you. Thank you for inviting us, because I think it is important on a regular basis for the folks from the Strategic Planning and Funding Division to spend time with the Graduate Education Advisory Committee, the Undergraduate Education Advisory, sort of making sure that you're all aware of the online resources that we have available for you. And over time, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the fact that we do have a new accountability system in the last, say, 3 years. I know we did some presentations for the members a few years back on introducing the system, but now that we've had it up and running for a while, we do spend a lot of time with folks at institutions kind of trying to directly answer the questions that they have about the system now that they've been able to use it for a while, make sure people are aware of the opportunities, the information available there, and also to have a discussion about what might not be there but might be useful to institutions. And I'll introduce myself. I guess I'm Julie Eklund, and I am the Assistant Commissioner over the Strategic Planning and Funding Division, and I'm here with Luis Martinez, and he is the data trainer on our staff, and he actually goes out and works with folks in the field, making them aware of what's available in terms of not only our accountability data, but the overall data that we have available. And today the main focus is going to be accountability data, but I'm happy to answer any questions beyond that. Luis is going to be doing some driving. I think I'll be doing some as well. Our hope is that we'll have a little time for you actually to go in and interact with the system, so that, and we'll be able to sort of wander around and make sure everyone is understanding how to get into the system and to use it, because it's one thing to listen to us tell you, here's what you have to click on and where you have to go to get this information. It's another thing when you sit down in your office and you're thinking, oh yeah, I should be very quickly able to figure out some of this program level data, and you're missing a step. The PowerPoints do have steps laid out. I'm going to quickly move off of the PowerPoint and actually into the application, but we tried to lay out the steps to get to some of the data outlined in the PowerPoint for you, so that you can go back to that if you are in your office and want to find this information. I'm also going to show you some ways to see the other information that's available. But we met with Jen and some folks in AQW and James, and kind of talked about what are the types of things that you are probably going to be most interested in. So if that's not the case, then feel free to redirect. If you see something interesting, we're happy to talk about other measures. Now, how many of you have been in the accountability system? Show of hands, just to give me a sense of how. Okay, it looks like you haven't. That's great. Then that makes it easy. I see one. That makes it easy that we're kind of starting from the beginning here. So let me jump in and show you what we have available. And the reason we redesigned the system was so that it would align with our new state plan. And I hope if I ask how many of you are aware of 60 by 30 text, I'll see a lot more hands raised. Thank you, yes, I assume that. So a lot of this will make sense to you in terms of the metrics, because we did try to align the metrics in the redesigned system with the new plan, but there were some additional metrics, because the accountability system isn't just about tracking the plan. There are some additional metrics that everyone felt was important, our board felt was important to include, so we do have some information in here that isn't something that's tracked in the plan. But everything in the plan that is tied to a metric, which is pretty much everything, including marketable skills, you will find measures in the accountability system for those. Okay, so let's start with I'm going to do a couple PowerPoints. So you all should be, and is this just an advanced button? Is that the easiest way to do this? Here we go. Work as soon as I click off of this. Okay, so everyone's familiar with zip codes. Did you all realize that we have a very easy link on our website to get to zip codes? If you didn't, it is there. I'll show you where that is, because that can come in handy if you're in our accountability system and you're trying to look up data by zip code for your institution, or comparative data for yours and other institutions. We've got a link right on our data page where you can get that zip code information for quick access, because I know I will frequently forget a code, and it's nice to know that's there. So I'll show you where that is. The other places we're going to go to are all listed here. I'm going to show you our main data site, which is Texas Higher Ed Data. That's the third bullet. We'll be jumping from there to the accountability system. I want to make you aware of the Texas Cruise system, which is the consumer resource for education and workforce statistics, because we do have data there about workforce outcomes by program level, including for graduate completers. So you're able to see what people are earning by institution and program level, again, including for graduate students, and I think that's helpful information to have, and that goes out several years. And then I've got the link to where I mentioned for the zip codes on the bottom. So these are handy to have if you want to go back and try to recreate our session today. So the first place I'm going to go now is I'm going to go to accountability, and I'm going to show you first where our measures are and then how to download data from our interactive system. So see if jumping off the PowerPoint will be easy. Here we go. So here's the main coordinating board website, our new site that you're probably familiar with. And if you go to data and reports, you will see that we have the accountability system listed here. We also have the higher ed data homepage. So I'm going to click on both so you can see. Here's the higher ed data homepage. And this has a link right here to accountability, front and center. You just click on the link. Or if you just want to go directly to accountability from the homepage, if that's easier, you can just select the Higher Education Accountability System, and it will take you right in. So those are two ways to get to the accountability system. The other way, if you can't remember any websites, it's pretty easy to remember 60by30text.com. This is our website that's just about the plan, and just think about if you want more data than just about the plan, you just go to the upper right and click more data, and boom, it'll take you right into the accountability system. So again, if you can remember 60by30text.com, we also have .org and .net, you can get to the accountability system, because I know sometimes it takes a while to find things. So lots of ways to get here. In terms of the accountability system, we're going to be focusing on public universities today. I would imagine that's where most interest is, but we also have information about career institutions, our HRIs, I saw Patrick back there somewhere, and our two-year colleges. We have information for the community colleges, the TSTCs, and the Lamar State colleges. Now, a helpful resource, and if you go to resources, is to look and select measures and definitions. So before I show you sort of how to use it, it's nice to know there's a place to go under resources where you can see, here's all the measures that are in the system that are part of accountability. And so once you're in that measures and definitions, you can select public universities, and here's the list of every measure that's here. And if you hover over the measure and click on it, you will see the definition. This is helpful even if you're in the interactive system, where I think we're going to spend the most time, because if you're looking at data in interactive and it's data that ties back to a measure and you're not exactly sure, well, how is this defined, what am I looking at? You will be able to go and look at the measures here and get a definition. So I think that can be useful. Again, a lot of the measures follow the plan. As you saw when we were back on the main page, we have the plan goals, our 60 by 30 text, completion, marketable skills, student debt, and then we have a sector-specific area. So if you selected public universities, it becomes highlighted, and then you can move through and select your area. But if you're not sure where something is, you can, again, go back to those resources. Have a lot of information in completion. But what you'll find is, although we have some data here, it tends to be aggregate for graduate students. It's not by program level, but we do have some data here where you can get information, for example, about degrees awarded by degree level, et cetera. And what's kind of handy with this one is, for example, if you wanted to, and you could choose any institution here, this is statewide, but let me just pick an institution and give you an example. We'll pick Sam Houston State, and then, which is one of our doctoral institutions, and we have accountability peer groups, and most universities are aware of those because they know emerging research institutions fall into a category where they have access to certain research data. We have our two research institutions are UT and A&M. We have emerging research, doctoral master's and comprehensive. And as you're looking at data, if you wanted to compare your institution to peers in the same group, we have groupings of data that will do that. But here I've just selected an institution, and what's handy is if you wanted to see what someone was doing, for example, in terms of master's program, overall in terms of the data, you can look here, but if you wanted to just look, for example, at, let's say, Hispanic males, you can clear the filter on the bottom, and then you can select. So you could say, all right, we want to see how many master's degrees are being earned by Hispanic males over time, or how many doctoral degrees, again, are being, I should say, being awarded and being earned. So it's a great way to get a flavor of the data if you're trying to very quickly understand a population. You could say, well, let's look at females now. Let's see if we have a gap here. And so here's female Hispanic. All right, well, let's look at Asian and not Hispanic, et cetera. So it allows that opportunity to very quickly go in and filter data to get an understanding at the institution level of populations. Now, we don't have program-level data by race, ethnicity, and gender, and that's because of FERPA requirements. We're not allowed to show that data, but we do have a lot of information about program-level enrollments and completions, and I'm going to show you where to find that. But I wanted to give you just a little sense overall about how the system works. One thing I like very much about this system is it's two-way. Most of the data comes from all of the data that the institutions report to us on a regular basis, but institutions have a portal. There are some measures that they enter, a couple of them, but institutions are allowed to put comments on any measures at all. So we get these contextual comments. So if an institution, for example, and I'm trying to think of a good example. I could give the example of Kingwood College in Houston. The hurricane pretty much shut them down a couple of years ago, and Hurricane Harvey. So they have a little comment under their enrollments explaining why their enrollments dropped to almost nothing in 2018, and then, get my years right, time goes fast, or that would have been fall 2017, and then they jumped back up in 2018, and they explain that. So, is Texas State, well, Texas State actually, they're good about adding comments, so that's a good place to actually see comments. So here we go. They're talking about the bachelor's degrees awarded by their institution, and they have compared that using the system to all the emerging research universities, and they were the third highest in terms of bachelor's degrees awarded. So sometimes institutions put those kind of comments in. And let me go back and select our all button again, so we're looking at all the students. And again, you can clear it and just look at certain populations. We have degrees and certificates awarded. We have graduation rates. We have head counts. So, and when we're able to have filters, we do. Often we can't because of FERPA. So that's just sort of the system in terms of the measures that are tracked. I will show you in terms of our categories that are not in the plan, are sector specific. Let me show you what those look like for universities. We have average and median class size, student-faculty ratio, research expenditures, tenure track faculty, et cetera. So see, these are some of the measures that the university accountability groups felt like were important. Our board agreed, and so they're included even though they are not measures in the plan. Again, the accountability system is more than just about the plan, but we did want to make sure that they aligned. So we do have several additional measures. Another good example is graduation rates. Graduation rates are not in the 60 by 30 text plan. We track completions. We care about all the students that complete, not just those who started first time, full time. But it's important, I think, to share and have graduation rate data in our system. So any questions before I jump into the interactive? Any questions about sort of looking at the measures that are tracked overall that are part of the system? Because interactive has detail about these measures, but it also has additional information that I think will be useful for all of you, especially related to program area.
Julie,
yes.
Back on that other page, yes. Can you show, one of the things that's nice about this is pulling out these tables into other documents or slides, and there's a button there for a complete report as well?
So I'm going to let Jose share that, because I know how to do it in the 60 by 30, but I'm not sure I know how to do it in accountability. I think she means in the 60 by 30 text to pulling out tables? Or do you mean interactive? Because that's where I was going to go.
The complete report and...
Oh, I know what you mean now. Sorry about that. She means the PDF report.
Yeah,
Yes.
they can
So
pull
if
this
you
out.
want you can get the complete report for all of the measures for your institution and just print them all out if it's something you want to take to a meeting or share. We know that often presidents ask to see these. The IR folks love having a button where they can just create a complete report and they don't have to jump around across the different measures. So it's a place where all in one location you can have the outcomes for an institution. So for example, why don't we pick an institution? And, well, you don't want to pick, oh, you're just jumping in to pick. Select institution, yeah. And where one of the things we've invested some resources in this summer is to have some help to try to speed up the system. So we're hoping it'll get faster over time. But we have the knuckles drumming, so you have to be a little patient. And I know many of you might be in there now too, which could be slowing it down. So let's just select. Yeah, A&M International is fine. So select an institution, and then we'll go ahead and select Create Complete Report PDF. So once you're on an institution, it doesn't matter what grouping of measures you're in. You could be in the completion goal or the student debt. Once you ask for that PDF, you'll get the complete report, and it will download, and then you can scroll through, and it will have the information for the institution you selected. So it's a great way if you kind of want to pull the metrics with you. These are the types of data that I know staff look at in AQW for program review, those types of things. So if you do want to print out a report, it's available there. We also have our higher ed almanac, which I believe we were going to share some if we had. I wasn't sure if we. Okay, we may be able to share a few with you today, but we have an almanac, which is also a great way to have sort of printed out information. Metrics for an institution. Okay, so any other questions about that? I do want to now jump into the interactive system. Okay, so we're back on the home page, and the nice thing is on that 60by30text.com, you saw the little button for more data. It was in red in the upper right. When you're in accountability, if you want more data than just what's in the accountability measures, you can go to the upper right and select interactive. And that's what we're going to do now. And there's 3 areas here. There's download data, and this would be if you have a query that you want to ask for specific information on a number of statistics. Some of them are measures in accountability, but some of them are just other pieces of information that's useful for institutions. And a lot of the information that used to live in prep, if you've been around a long time, do people remember those prep reports maybe? It's now here. So we don't have the prep system, but we have it available here. We also have recently developed a predefined reports area, and this is an area where you can go in and maybe just click on that, Luis. You can go in and select reports, and we don't have too many in here yet, but this is a place where we have sort of standard reports where you can compare across institutions, and it's a quick and easy way to pull the sort of the most requested data. All of this is in interactive. You could create these reports yourselves, but we're trying to make it easy for some folks who don't want to go in, select their various filters and create it themselves. So we've put together some comparison reports that are frequently asked for. And that's the sort of thing you can share with me today. If you feel like, here's something it would help to have in there, and we know when we need that, we can go right to that predefined report and we don't have to create it. So always good to be thinking about, is there something that would be useful to institutions that we could create and provide easy access in this location. Okay, now we're gonna go back and we're gonna go to the download data. And I think, and let's just on that accountability reports, that's also another place you can get the reports for each institution. So let's go back and show them that, Luis. So we've got 2 ways to get those full reports. No, sorry. Full reports for institution, and that's under accountability reports. And so you can basically select what you want to see in those PDFs and print out for the entire institution or for a sector or for statewide. You could print out the full report with all the accountability measures. But now let's go to the star of our show, at least in terms of, I think, what will be helpful for you. Let's go back to the interactive and look at some of the program level data and faculty type data, those type things that I think will be useful to have. And I'm just following along, and I think we're in line. So once you click on the download data, there are going to be a lot of filters. So you need to start with selecting an institution type, and of course we're going to select public universities today to show you what's available that would be relevant. When you get into that, there's two things you can do. If you want to do a comparison report and you just want to look at other institutions, for example, if you want to see how many graduates in a certain program area, a certain SIP area are there across the state. So, you know, you're thinking about starting a new program, you want to get a feel for who else has these types of programs. You can go in and you can hit select all institutions. And the data you're going to get, and you'll see what happens here, the data you're going to get is just for the individual institutions. It's not going to be grouped by accountability peer group. It's not going to be grouped by sector. You're just going to get it for the institutions. So when you do that, the data that's going to be created is going to show, it's not going to have additional data added in, for example, for a peer group, which if you're trying to total statewide, you're going to get duplicates. Does that make sense? So if you selected, for example, I want to see for emerging research institutions, and then I want to see for these 6 additional institutions, when you did totals with that data you collected, if you're trying to look at program area, you're going to get duplicates if any of those 6 additional are one of those emerging research institutions. So it's just, we just made it easy for everyone and said, if you just want to see the institutions so you won't get duplication, just select all institutions. Okay, so we're looking at public universities now. Now there's a very large drop down, and here are all of the data tables that are available to you, the data reports that you can ask for when you're in this system. What I'm going to do is we're going to look at, to start with, 2 that have to do with curriculum area, because I think those are going to be of most interest. One is the degrees and certificates awarded by curriculum area, and the other has to do with enrollments by curriculum area. So again, for your institutions or other institutions, if you're interested in, hey, this program or that program, what do the numbers look like, this is where you're going to be able to find it. So let's select either one, I think is fine. And then you're going to be asked different questions. So years to filter. In this case, let's just deselect the select all, and what will happen is everything will be selected, but you can just hit select all, it'll deselect. Let's pick the most recent year, 2018. We don't need something too huge. And then let's go ahead, and when it says major type, let's just select academic, because that's pretty much what we're interested in at our universities. Keep going. And then the level to filter, let's, in this case, select, any ideas? Do people want to see doctoral research scholarship? Let's try that. So let's select just doctoral research scholarship. So these are academic doctoral programs, and keep going. And then SIP. Okay, so the way the SIPs are structured is you can select a 2-digit SIP, which is, there's just 39, they're the high level. And you might want to do that if you're thinking, I don't know where that institution might have grouped a particular program. I'm not sure what the 8-digit SIP might be at different institutions. So I'm just going to look at all of it for that SIP area, and then I can eyeball it and decide what I care about. Or what you can do is you can get more specific into the 8-digit SIP. So here, let's just select a SIP. Why don't we pick something, keep scrolling. Yeah, we don't want agriculture. Let's pick English, or keep going. How about physical? Let's pick physical sciences. They're fun. I think it's 40. Yeah, we'll pick physical sciences. And so what we're going to do is deselect and then scroll down. And again, if you wanted to pick everything, you could do that, and you'd have a very large report, and depending on your capacity with things like pivot tables, you'd be able to get to these things as well. But we're picking physical sciences, and then with SIPs, then we have to scroll through to the SIPs for 40, and we can select one, or we could just leave it as none selected and see what comes up for everybody. Let's select a specific one. I think just for illustration. So you're going to scroll down till we get to the 4 O's. So keep scrolling, and then it's going to be quite a ways down. So okay, now back. So once you get to that area, you can see all the SIPs where we have programs in the state. So we have general chemistry, organic chemistry, et cetera. So actually, why don't we pick general and organic chemistry? And let's see if there's any more chemistry. I think that's probably going to be, no, forensic chemistry. There you go, very interesting. Okay, and that's it. So and applied, sorry. Have we hit all the chemistry? So you can do something like this. You can select anything you want, again, for comparison purposes, and then you're going to go ahead and hit View Report. You've made all the selections that are possible. And then what's going to happen is a report is going to show up actually on the screen. Now, sometimes what happens is the report is just below what you see on your monitor. And when we first got the system, that would drive me nuts, because I'd like, why isn't it coming up? Why isn't it coming up? And then I realized you have to scroll. So usually the reports come up pretty quickly. If you ask for a massive amount of data, it could take a little while. But the report's going to come up, and the way it's organized is you're going to see for every institution, it's going to have a record. If it's a unique SIP, a unique institution, you're going to have a student count. So you're going to know, and we did enrollment, correct? You're going to know who's. Oh, we did degrees. So you're going to know who earned degrees in that year. So this is 2018 from that institution. So you can look through and explore just by looking at this report if you're trying to get a sense of numbers and who's offering what. And again, you'll see the SIPs are clearly provided. Keep going down and you'll see you can hit next page. So there are 9 pages here. But something that's makes... just 9 entries. Oh, so it's small. Sometimes it'll tell you if it's several entries, so it might say 20 of 2,000 entries. Then you know you're going to have to keep scrolling and scrolling, and that's not going to be an easy way to look at data. So what you can do is you can basically drop this into Excel. So you can hit, now there's nothing that says drop into Excel, which gets confusing to people, but what you want to select for that is create CSV. And that basically will put the data into an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to hit open at the bottom. Hopefully your filters at your institution will let you do this. And what you're going to see is all the data is going to show up in an Excel spreadsheet. And for those of you who work at all in Excel, there's a whole lot you can do with it once it's there. And if it's a big, long report, you can go ahead and filter it, look for different types of things. You can create charts, you can create graphs. There's a lot of opportunity. But I think this is very useful information for at the program level that I think sometimes folks aren't aware is out there. Okay, I'm going to ask, are most of you in academic departments, or are you deans over, are you provosts and deans over that? I'm just wondering if people have or if you have a pet department. Why don't everyone take a minute and see if they can go ahead and choose degree, type, area, level, and see if you can use the system now to find out how many degrees were awarded at universities in that area across the state. So whether it's master's, in English, or professional doctorate in law, or whatever the case may be, choose an area and see if you're able to have this report, to generate this report. And we'll wander a little bit and see if you have any questions. And we were going to provide 2 ways to get online. If anybody's really slow, let me know, because when we do training, sometimes we do have 2 ways to access the internet from this room, and if things are really slow, we could give you the other option. Jen, did you send those out to folks, the different links? Okay, great. So hopefully things are moving pretty quickly. Hey, need some help? Oh, just stop. Yeah, just start over. We'll give you the other link if we need to. You know it can be slow and everyone. You might select a low enrollment degree program. Or I was going to say you could here, I mean. I got it. You got the idea. Good. That's all that matters. Just let me know when you're, if you've we've been able to create the report. Oh, looks like we got one. We got everybody's. Looks like they're there. Just get James' help there. We know James knows that. This is AQW staff really likes this particular function. Are you just exploring or having trouble finding how to do this? You're exploring. Good, good. So you were, oh, good. And you're kind of curious. Okay, yeah. Sometimes when people are aware, this data can be very helpful, in fact, for grant applications if you're needing to provide some general information about your institution or specific information about program areas. And we have a couple of other practice activities for the end, but I thought we'd mix it up and spend a little time on this one. Is everybody pretty good? No, we got a few people who are still working at it. Anybody need help? I think the key thing is once you've done it, it should be pretty straightforward, and you have your PowerPoint. So remember, it's here. In terms of our enrollments, I wanted to say a little something about that, because if we do have enrollment by curriculum area, and Luis is selecting that now. What's important to remember is we see a lot of movement in this category, especially when we're looking at lower level undergraduates. So you have a lot of students who come in and they say they're going to be an English major, and then they change their mind, and then it shifts. So if you're looking at feeder patterns, for example, if you're interested in how many English grads do we have around the state and where are they coming from, or are we seeing our enrollments and completions drop in certain degree areas, again, thinking about feeder, you could use this system to get a sense of if you're seeing trends and changes over time, because you saw you can select several years, or to see if there are shifts in kind of what people are graduating in. But it's important if you're just looking at enrollments to keep in mind that until students pretty much get to their junior year, we don't have a whole lot of confidence in the data. Because sometimes institutions will report what they say when they come in, and they won't update it with us. Although we collect data every semester on this, they won't update it with us until the students at the beginning of their junior year. And that has implications also for talking about things like completion rates in program areas. For graduate students, it's pretty darn reliable that if you're looking at a graduate major, that's going to be those students who are enrolled in that program. And that's the nice thing for you if you're, again, looking at the graduate information, is you can get a very good understanding of what's happening there. But it is good either whether you're looking at your own undergraduates or your own program, or if you want to look around the state, it does give you a sense in different fields for enrollment trend changes, completion changes, that type of information. Obviously, we don't have it for out of state. It can be a quick way, too, if you're trying to do comparisons rather than having to go to lots of different websites, and you're trying to find out about a program. It can spare you that by putting everything in one place, and then you can go to websites if you need more detail about a particular program. We can't tell you what the program is called, and James will tell you that programs have lots of different titles that end up under the same SIP, but I think you can be pretty confident that the SIP area should be accurate. Do you think that's appropriate? So again, you might have to do more, or you might not find the program called what it is here, but at least it's a place to start in terms of the SIP, and you should be able to go to the institution's website once you've determined they do have a program that has enrollees and graduates in that area. So again, helpful information to have. We also wanted to show you a couple of the other data sets that are in here. You saw there are some faculty measures in accountability. You can look if you want to use the The main accountability system for some of these measures, anything that's in the main system, you can just, the quick way to go there is just to find that measure in the accountability system and not have to bother with creating these specialized reports. But if you want to do comparisons across institutions, instead of having to go to 5 different institutions and look at their data, this is the way to quickly create a comparison report. So Luis is hovering over FTE faculty who are tenure track. So we can select that, which I believe is a measure, but you could go in here, and if you're just interested, let's just select, for example, emerging research institutions. So this is one. I want to show you how we can use, we're going to stay with universities, and we're going to go to the filter, and well, let's just select 2017. The faculty data is a semester behind, and then we're going to go ahead and when we filter, and I'm trying to think what we've got. Oh, select institution, I'm sorry, that's where I wanted to go. So what we can do here, we're going to deselect, so we're starting from scratch. Let's select emerging research, and then let's go ahead and select one institution that's an emerging research, and I want to show you then how you can do a comparison. If this is your peer group, you can see how what your institution looks like, and this is for any measures, compared to your peers. So rather than looking at the statewide data for universities, you can look at the data for only those in your peer group, and that can be very helpful. So here we've selected Texas State, which is an emerging research university, and then you can go ahead and we selected a year. Let's select both tenure and tenure track. Oh, you have to go back, sorry, because I got you out of order there. Okay, so now we can select, just pick a year, and then you can select, leave it, select all, and then let's hit view, oh no, actually take off non-tenure track, sorry. Take off non-tenure track, and then let's hit view report. So obviously it's going to be small, but you can see of all the tenure track institutions, here's how many tenure track faculty are at all those institutions, here's how many there are at Texas State. And there might be some measures where you're seeing a percentage, grad rates, those type of things, so this can be probably more useful for comparison purposes than something that's a whole number, but this might be interesting as well if you want to, for something like faculty. So just wanted to illustrate that there is that ability to select a peer group and then see how your particular institution compares. And if like Texas State in their comments where they're saying, hey, we're the 3rd best in this category for our peer group, that's something you could do for a grant. It's something you could do to try to attract students, talking about, hey, of all the emerging research institutions, for blah, blah, blah measure, you know, our institution is in the top group or is the best. And if they're the worst, you might not want to include that. But in any case, the opportunity, but that might be real food for thought to say, why aren't we doing as well on this measure? Again, depending on what the measure is. So we wanted you to be aware that there's that capability also for comparison purposes. Okay, so for faculty, I think we provided a list for you of the faculty data sets. Now, I'll ask you, is there anything about faculty here, again, something that would be straightforward and not complex, that would be program specific, but anything you think we're not sharing that isn't here? And maybe we can go back to resources and we'll kind of look at our faculty measures. There we go, and I'm going to hit universities. And most of them are in sector specific. So we have FTE faculty who are tenure track, and we have research expenditures per FTE faculty. And that actually might be an interesting one to look at comparisons by peer group, because you probably don't want to be comparing to an institution that's very different than yours. So we do, again, have some research expenditure information here. In the old Closing the Gaps plan, there was a goal focused on research. So some of these accountability measures or information that we've provided for a while, and our accountability folks felt like there were a couple of important measures tied to research they wanted to keep in the system, and this was one of them, so it's a good example. Okay. How many of you have ever made a pivot table? Anybody know what pivot tables are? I have to tell you, this data is amazing for pivot tables. So instead of, we've been honing in on really specific things in the data and creating these very small reports, but there's a whole lot out there, and if you select all for SIPs and all for institution types and maybe just pick, for example, doctoral degrees awarded, but you pick every single SIP and every single institution that awards doctoral degrees, you can create a very nice table that you can set up as a pivot table, which is a way to manipulate data so that you can very quickly select different variables, if you will, and look at the results. So you could create a pivot table, for example, where you wanted to say, all right, let's look at English programs across the state, and I want to very quickly see what the number of degrees awarded look like for different years. So you can very quickly pivot and say, show me 13, show me 14, show me 15. So instead of having a giant Excel spreadsheet where you've got to tease out all the information, because you saw there's lots and lots of columns, you can create a pivot table, and Excel is designed so that you can very easily manipulate the data, pull a drop down, and look at what you want to see. So I would suggest, if it's not an area of expertise that you have, know that your IR people have this, and it's a very, very quick and easy way to work with this data and get the information that you need. And again, it can save a lot of time to have that capacity. So I'm a big fan of pivot tables, and it is something that's valuable to know, even if it's not a skill that you have. It might be something you want to learn, or something, again, you want to work with people in your department. If you've got someone who's a whiz at that sort of thing, and you're trying to make some decisions where this data would be helpful, very, very helpful to drop it all into pivot tables. Okay. Any other questions about interactive? You can kind of, at your leisure, scroll through the long list of the types of information we have there. Again, it's what used to be in prep, which I know was very popular. I don't get those phone calls anymore about why, where's prep? There's a few pieces that might be a little bit different, but we are always open, and now you've met me and seen me. I'm very open to emails or calls. If there's something you think that would be very helpful in terms of those predefined reports or some information to add, we'll definitely consider it. Now, we don't change our accountability measures. Those will remain consistent over the course of the plan. Those were adopted by our board. But that interactive gives us that opportunity, if there's data that's really going to be helpful for folks, to drop it in. We do just have to be cognizant of meeting privacy requirements. So, for example, that's why we don't show race, ethnicity by program level data, et cetera, because we've had to be very careful about what we show and what we don't. So we've provided as much granularity as we can. We're also available to do, if there's a request that someone has for something really specific, we can also provide specific data to institutions that might not be here. So. And of course, that would have to be, we'd have to meet privacy requirements, but there's ways to mask data and do that where we couldn't drop it into a table, but we could mask if we had some small numbers. Okay, anything else? Let me just make sure, I did mention our almanac, and let's just quickly look at, and timing-wise, do we have, about 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes? Okay, just give me, let me know. I want to show you, first in the almanac, and the almanac is available, we can open, we've got a 2019, but it looks like we don't have the link yet. But we have data in the almanac that provides information about wages by program area and by degree type, and I wanted to make sure you were aware of that, because once you're aware of what we can do, and this is the high-level data, then Texas Cruise, the information there will be very helpful, because that gives it to you at the program level for all programs, as I mentioned, across the state. So we're going to go to page, and I think we've got slides on this, but that's fine. We're going to go to the page in the almanac, and you've got a slide 16 that we shared. If you have the slides, what we show on the left-hand side and what is on the left-hand side here in the different colors. These are the earnings of graduates over 10 years, and this is by degree level. Now again, remember this type of information, we have this by program level as well in the Texas Cruise system. So these are, again, earnings over 10 years by degree level, and it shows it at 1, 3, 5, 8, and 10 years out. So you can see some of the differences in terms of our various programs. Makes some of us with doctoral degrees, which we had those doctoral professional degrees. But anyway, it's helpful, again, helpful to know that we're able to provide this data. We do have a data sharing agreement with the Texas Workforce Commission, and so we are provided with wage data. The nice thing is that we get the wage data. We're able to link it to our graduates. We do get NAIS codes, which are industry codes. Unfortunately, there's not a way to know occupation. And we really wish we could track your grads and tell you exactly where they're found working in terms of their occupation. We can't do that, but we have general industry information, which is available in Cruise. You can also see on the screen, on the right-hand side in the middle, here's earnings by field. This is for bachelor's grads, but again, this is the type of information that we have for grads at all levels, and so you can see differences. These are just first-year earnings that we show in this slide, and then the next slide in the bottom of where Luis is, you can see we have those earnings at the 1, 3, 5, and 10 years out. So this page, I think, gives you a flavor if you're ever trying to tell someone, hey, this is the type of information the coordinating board has. This page in the almanac gives you a flavor of the type of data we have, and then I'll take you into the Texas Cruise system, and you can see how it works to look for it for your specific programs by your specific institutions. Again, if you're interested in what's happening for outcomes. We also have accountability measures that show if we find students working and enroll, but those, I believe, are focused on the bachelor's degree level. We don't have those for graduate. Okay, yes?
How do you get these data?
We get them from the Texas Workforce Commission, and they get them from the UI wage data. We only have them for people in Texas, and we don't have them for people who are self-employed. Yes, it does. It sure does. We are only allowed to show aggregated data, so we cannot provide, because of FERPA, individual data for people's earnings, but we're able to show aggregated data in terms of average wages.
Only those who are employed in Texas.
Yes. We only have those employed in Texas. UT System has an arrangement with the Census Bureau where they actually they have some out-of-state data where the Census Bureau does some linking for them, and it's something that we hope maybe we might be able to do also for more than just the system, but right now we just have it for Texas. Now, for some graduate programs, it's not real helpful just to have it for in the state, and maybe that's where you're going, and we look forward to having information from nationally if we're able to get that. Again, it's something that we hope to be able to do, but UT Austin, what they have now is, UT System through GEAC UT is a good example of the type of information that's available. And the thing, if you're tracking your graduate students, there is an industry category that's college or university employment. And again, if you find someone who completed a graduate degree with you, you don't know if they're working in the student center selling books behind the counter or if they're a faculty member. But you know that we found them in college or university employment, which I think can be helpful. The same thing as if someone earns an accounting degree, you might see someone in the hospitality industry with an accounting degree. They could be an accountant for a large restaurant chain, or they could be a server. And unfortunately, we don't have the occupation data. I think only 2 states in the country do, but it is helpful to have those industry codes. And they get fairly specific for some areas. So again, you can scroll through, and for things like engineering degrees, often the top categories, it clearly looks like someone is doing work that's related to their degree, but you never know for sure. Okay, so let's go into Cruise now. And this is a website that is going to be, we believe it's going to be updated. We're working with TWC now, and we're hoping that this will be improved, but the data, if you're using it for the purposes of research, it's, I think, pretty useful for students. We're hoping to have something that's a little more student-friendly. So we can select an institution. So let's select 4-year institutions. And so once you're in Texas Cruise, and again, the same place you find this is where you found the accountability system on that texashighereddata.org site. You just select Texas Cruise. And let's show them how to get there again, because you did it quickly. So you go up to Workforce when you're on the main page, and then the second area there is Texas Consumer Resource for Education and Workforce Statistics. And once you get in, just hit that big Get Started button. Once you're there, for your purposes, I would say you can either select a major or you can select an institution tier, and that's going to be 4-year, and then you can go ahead and let's pick a research university, maybe pick A&M. Try to mix it up with the people we choose. So we're picking A&M, and then where it says select an area of study, let's go up and see, let's pick something academic. So something in the humanities, or, go back again. Oh, actually, pick computer and mathematical occupations, what the heck. And then let's go ahead and say computer and information research scientists. And then let's go ahead where it says select a major. Let's pick computer and information sciences general. And then let's see what we find. Oh, no, and over here, I don't think that matters, right, because we're not doing it in this direction. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we find. Okay, and then there's years on here. It's really important to adjust the year. They go back a long way because we do have the 10 years of data, but here let's go down to 2016. It's always a little earlier because we do have to track graduates into the workforce, so we can't have as recent data as we have for things like graduates. Okay, and here you can look at the information about, here's some occupations, but then you can see wages, and this is actually not, if you scroll down, I don't believe this is just the A&M. I'm going to have to go down and select A&M. And it's probably worth going in A&M overall. Let's see. Keep going. Oh, they're not. Keep going. Let's see. Oh, yeah, because we were in associates. Keep going, bachelor, keep going. We want to go to graduate level. So here we're scrolling through in this area. Let's go to master's. And so now let's pick A&M. Right. Where is A&M on here? We'll pick UT Austin, because it's got to be there somewhere, but we'll pick UT Austin. And here what you'll see is people who have earned the degrees in that area. Average earnings by degree level, computer and information sciences general, you have popular programs, and then you can also see on the left-hand side, you've got first-year earnings, we have some loan-to-wage ratios, information about the number of completers in that area with loans, et cetera. So just some of it's general information. We also have time to degree for folks in the program. So again, a lot of information there, and here you can look out in terms of wages. So I'd suggest you spend some time in this and sort of play around with different areas, and we have folks who are happy to help you on staff if you're trying to get specific information. I just want to make sure people were aware that it's available. Again, we're working to make it more user-friendly, but the information is there and I think can be very, very useful. Oh, and you can put it in Excel as well. So for those of you who like Excel and pivot tables, you're able to do that. It also will show information, I believe. It shows number of grads, and then I believe it has information about who we have wages for. If I remember correctly, just like in the almanac, you can look when we show wages, it'll show, for example, well, this is 40% of the completers or 80% of the completers that are actually represented by this wage. So you can get a sense of, is this the full population, most of the population, or just a small percentage of those graduates. So again, useful information to have. Okay, any questions about the workforce data we have available? And we do have information about whether students are working or enrolled, but just for bachelor's degree recipients, and that's in accountability. So if you're just curious about are people found working or are they found enrolled in education elsewhere, we've got that as well, or in a higher degree. So you can look at that. Again, I wish we could tell you exactly the occupation they're working in. We're not able to do that. We do have, I'll show you one other report that I think is kind of helpful. The RAND Corporation produced a report for the coordinating board. It was legislatively required back in 2014. And if you go back to where it says workforce, that's, I thought it was there. No, workforce reports, aligning workforce needs and education. they did some interesting things where they used the American Community Surveys data, which is a survey done nationally, but you can get Texas-specific data. That is a survey just for bachelor's degrees where the survey recipients report what they're doing as well as what their degree was that they earned if it was a bachelor's degree. And they did some interesting work to look at, by bachelor's degree, what fields are people found in. And for some fields, it was very much a direct pipeline where the majority of people, nursing is a good example, were found where their occupation was nurse. There are other fields that, and many in the humanities, a good example might be English, or we looked at things like psychology, where you find people in lots of different fields, sometimes one where you might not think there's a direct link. So it's a helpful report to get a sense of how we make some of those connections and ways to think about those connections in terms of the degrees to the workforce. Okay, yes.
Is there any data on there as to how long they stay?
That's actually a very good question because we have never looked at that. And that I think would be an excellent thing we could look at because we do have the wages, we have the records going back and we know the industry codes. So we could look to see if they'd stayed in the industry. We couldn't look, we couldn't know beyond that, but I think that's actually a very good idea. That's something we could look at to say, are people staying in the industry? We do know when we look at things like in the Almanac, when we track history, bachelor's degrees, it's kind of interesting that they kind of look the same as the other humanities in the first year out, and then you go 10 years out, and you tend to see people with history degrees have a bigger bump than, for example, English degrees, where you would think, well, might that be comparable? And it's not. So I think that's actually a very good question and something we can look at. Anything else? I mean, this is helpful to me to hear if you have questions about how we might be able to use this data or mine this data in ways that could be helpful. I know it's a lot to think about, so feel free to share at another point in time. And then we do have something, we have some exit cohort information here. I don't want to spend a lot of time on here, but this is also, some of this information is required because of gainful employment federal requirements. There's some information that we have where we use the wage data where it's the initial reason for it was focused on Perkins and some gainful employment legislation, but we do have information in those exit cohort reports about folks who are at universities as well. And that's under workforce reports, under exit cohort reports. And Luis, if you click on that, we'll kind of give people a little flavor. And you can explore here, but this is where we have that information of if someone's working or enrolled or both. And let's select, well, we've got a university. Let's stick with Angelo State, and then we can say, let's just select a cohort so we don't get something too huge. Let's go to graduate completers. Well, let's pick an institution that probably has more doctoral students. So maybe A&M will work for this one. There we go. There's A&M. Okay. Graduate completers. Let's hit View PDF. And then it has information about what's available. And then you can scroll through and you see the reports. And for students, we will have who we find working, who we find working and enrolled, who we find enrolled only. So there's some detail, not about wage, but about where we actually find students when we track them through to the wage data and to higher education data for the state. And again, much of what we do is just for Texas. We're hoping to be able to look beyond at some point. Okay. All right, and then why don't we jump back to the slides? I think I've pretty much covered, let me show you where we have some additional faculty salary data. Is that of interest? Oh, yes, question. Mm-hmm. Are you saying that? Mm-hmm. Yep. Right, whether we found them working in the state or enrolled somewhere in the state or working and enrolled, or if we didn't find them, which doesn't mean, of course, they're not working, which is the challenge. we're more fortunate than many states. We could be, you know, in New Jersey where people go all over. At least we're a large state. We do find, I think, about 80% of our students overall we find working in the state, but that goes down for, if you look at graduate students, and it also really varies by institution. So UT Austin, we're less likely to find graduates working in the state, and our community colleges, I think we often go up to about 90% in terms of graduates who we find working. So it can really vary, but that's a good question. And again, we did get a legislative appropriation to get National Student Clearinghouse data, to get some additional National Student Clearinghouse data, which helps us track students who enroll out of state, from high school to college. And we also do get some data for students who are enrolled out of state, that we track for success points for community colleges to see if students transfer out of state. I do not, in fact, it's something for me to check. I'm not sure the detail that we get on graduate students. It might be worth looking, because if we do have the graduate student enrollments as well, then we could look to see students who completed, for example, bachelor's in the state who are enrolling, or master's in the state if they're enrolling in some kind of a graduate program beyond. And I would think for some of your faculty, even graduate faculty, if they're teaching undergraduates, they might be interested to see, hey, are people enrolling in college beyond that level, or enrolling at universities, I should say, beyond that level, yeah. Okay, good question. And then this is, all right, and we do have a place under finance and facilities where we have faculty salaries. We also have research expenditure information there. So again, just if something's not in accountability, it doesn't mean we don't have information, but accountability is a good place to start. So if you select faculty salaries, we do have information by institution. We try to make it easy for you, or you can jump in and look at average faculty's salaries. We've got calculators. We also load some information from AAUP about the 10 most populous states with faculty salaries, so this can be a handy tool to have available. So if you, again, let me know if you want me to go any deeper. We'll open one for you and let you see. And then we're probably, our time is probably out. So this is just an example of a summary faculty salary report, and then you can select, there's detail. We also, the data that goes into the accountability system about faculty salaries is also loaded at this location. So we have all the faculty salary information in one place. So again, lots of great data resources. People aren't always aware of them, but I wanted to stress that interactive data system for program level data, because I think it's valuable to have. One thing I did want to ask about, we used to have a tool years ago that was, it looked at existing programs and provided some data for those. And we really don't get any questions anymore, and it was, I think, more useful in an earlier time because some legislative requirements changed. But there was one piece, people were sometimes interested in completion data, and for completions we would look at students who declared a major as a junior, and then how many actually completed in that major. And that is one thing that I still do get asked about, and I did want to point out that that's something that we could develop some methodologies to give to institutional research staff at institutions if they wanted to be able to actually provide that data. They would have information about who's in a major and then whether they completed in that major. And because often institutions will call and I'll say, well, that's something your institution could actually do for you. So is that something that's useful, or that might be something I want to talk to GEAC about? Would you think, James, or I don't know how much? Or is that something that at this point in time it probably isn't an important piece of information?
Yeah, maybe not as much.
Not as much? Okay, thanks. I just wanted to mention it because that is the one thing we occasionally get questions about, and I want to remind people that all this student level data that we have, anything from your institution reports to us. If it's something where we're combining information, for example, grad rates, where we're showing if someone graduated from your institution or a different institution, we need to do that because we know where everyone graduated from, and your institution will only know your own graduates. But there's some information that your IR staff could produce for you, and just important to remember, if you see an element here and you think, oh, I didn't know that that's something that gets reported. Know that the institution's reporting it to us in many cases, and you could inquire of them if it's something that, if you have a report or something, you want to have them develop. So again, important to remember that. There are a few things that we bring in from other places, and we're happy to share that if you have a question about what your institution provides. We also have all our reporting manuals online, so you can look and see the very specific data that comes to us. All right, well, I don't want to give you data overload, but thank you for your patience. It's nice to see at different points, different people something seemed to be resonating with them. So hopefully this will be useful, or feel free to bring the slides back and share with people in your departments if you think it would be helpful to them. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you, Luis and Julie. We wanted to invite them to come not only for discussions about creation of new programs and following trends at the graduate level, but also with our iterations and drafting of the strategic plan for graduate education. If you'll recall from the last meeting, we had also worked with their division to identify existing data sets because there was conversation if we're setting a target or a goal within that strategic plan for graduate education, it'd be helpful if it could be measured. And so a lot of identifying those data that would link to the priority areas was through these different data sources. And so as the strategic plan moves along its process, this will be helpful for you all to look at your institution and comparison-wise, and also have a better understanding of how we did that mapping as well. So hopefully these tools will be useful in the future to connect to different areas that we're working on in graduate education. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Okay. So our next item, number 12, is an update on and discussion of the Learning Technology Advisory Committee activities. And so you all, I think, received an email letting you know that the LTAC had a meeting on Friday, and there was an agenda item to discuss GEAC activities and possible common interests. And so James and Jennifer were present at the meeting, and then myself and Andrew, we called in, and then also Karen, right? Yeah, so the three of us called in to the meeting and listened, and I guess we had a little opportunity to chime in after they discussed a few things. So James and Jennifer, I don't know if you want to talk about what you all, sort of how you set the stage, and then.
Certainly. So Jennifer and I were here in person for the meeting, and we gave a little bit of background on GEAC and kind of help people get clear in their minds how we're different from UEAC. LTAC, UEAC, and GEAC are kind of three broad-based constituency committees that cover a lot of different institutions and a lot of different program types, and we sort of laid that out for them. And we talked about the constituency of GEAC itself, that it's mostly public universities and mostly graduate deans, but also some frontline faculty members. It's also some health-related institutions and also some private institutions, which is kind of similar to UEAC itself, and also similar to LTAC, which covers the 2-year and the 4-year sectors. Then we got into some points where we could do potential collaboration, some points where the interests of the two committees meet. One of those that I took away was that the LTAC might be interested in helping us develop some ways to include assessment of the online component of master's and doctoral programs and graduate program review. Right now, that's not a front and center part of those reviews. Mostly, those program reviews focus on the different, measures in the self-study, faculty and student characteristics and program completion rates and things like that. And we talked about how it could be useful to include some ways to address the online component and how that could be included in graduate program review. Jennifer?
Thanks. One of the other discussion points was sometimes a new program will go and be heard before the LTAC committee if it has distance education components. And so some of the questions that were asked was, well, what does LTAC look for in a program that would be heard at that committee meeting? And so they discussed some of the different criteria. They're looking at the integrity of the program and its delivery mode. And LTAC has worked with coordinating board staff on the principles of good practice, which discuss distance education and delivery and curriculum delivery. They're also looking at the assessment, exams, proctoring, student authentication. These are similar to what Dr. Lauder presented when he came and visited with us in February. And they're also discussed the LMS training for faculty and advisors and student services and resource availability. And then finally, they mentioned the interaction between faculty and students. So if a developing program is heard by and reviewed by that committee, they're looking at the components surrounding the distance ed delivery and not necessarily the discipline-specific curriculum, but more like the delivery and the interaction and the services around and supporting the program. So that's helpful for proposal development to understand sort of framing what's occurring with the program. And sort of as a side thought for programs we've seen come before, sometimes the delivery mode is inherent in that college, that this is what we do, this is what we know, that it's very intrinsic or integrated into the daily operations. And so being able to articulate and communicate that through the proposal documentation or through the meeting processes is really helpful, and the review from the LTAC committee helps illuminate how the institution intends to offer this program to students. I don't know, Karen, if you had other thoughts.
We're both Karen.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think most of those were the things that I had on notes. The only thing else I had was, I guess there was a little bit of discussion about the multi-location delivery model, because there had, I guess, been a few recently that they reviewed and they talked about. So as an example, if you have one campus and you have another campus and you're sort of offering a degree, some kind of way in coordination between those campuses, and I guess they're scrutinizing it to, I guess, see whether or not those students are going to get similar experiences on each of those campuses. And I think we have, actually, a few of those cases recently, too, in that pool. So I was particularly interested to hear what kinds of things they were looking at.
Thank you for inviting us, because that was really interesting. I just thought it was interesting to see what the two committees' charges were, and to clarify, because I did not know, and I think each committee didn't have a good understanding maybe of the specifics, and so by clarifying, it just seemed like there's more possibilities to collaborate in the future and just exchange ideas of how we can work together to move online forward.
So just one other question. So then, I thought that the part also where they talked about our collaborating to kind of come up perhaps with some guidance on what things, we might, like for example, when we give instructions to reviewers for graduate program reviews, things that we might want them to look at in terms of the distance component. And so who would drive to help to, make that happen? Do you think that this is on their radar and they will definitely do it? Is this something that, we should check in with them on? Because I think it would be extremely valuable to us, because it is really true that, when you have programs and it's not distance and, you have reviewers, a lot of times they are not looking at anything specific to, those aspects of it.
Yeah, I think, Jennifer and I will liaison with Dr. Andrew Lofters, who's the staff representative, and I think we'll try to set something up maybe specifically on a couple of 2 or 3 topics that have proved to be of interest. Yeah, I'm not sure whether that'll result in an electronic meeting or a face-to-face meeting, but we'll figure out a way to get representatives of the 2 committees together and maybe do something to clarify and narrow down to specify what we want to get at, and then we'll figure out a way to get representatives of the 2 groups together.
Any questions from anyone who was not in attendance? Actually, it seemed like a very engaged group, too, because they had people asking questions who were calling in, people who were present. So,
I think in our post-meeting email, I can send the roster, which might be helpful because there are several LTEC members at institutions that some of y'all are on, and connecting with them and to further Karen's point, both Karen's point, just like our meetings with GEAC, LTEC's an open meeting, so they're going to be broadcast live, and anyone can come in person or watch it on the live stream, and then it's archived as well. So if there's points of interest, we can access information that way as well. But I'll send the roster so you all can see who's a current member.
okay. So our next item 13, update on coordinating board activities. I think lunches seems like we're getting tired, right?
All right, so most of what I'm going to talk about here are bills that either have passed or are probably about to be signed into law. But I also wanted to remind you that you'll want to look through your own bill funding patterns, particularly in HB1 and the funding, and see the funding patterns to see, if you have any special items that might have changed funding or been introduced, or some of your other items have been changed in terms of funding. So be sure to look at the formula funding and how that's affected. I also want to, before I get going, want to remind you that in October, at the end of October, we have both a Community and Technical College liaison meeting and a university and health-related institution liaison meeting. Excuse me. And we're going to try a new format where we do sort of like TACRO does, if you guys have any experience with that, where you sort of bookend the 2 groups together, and you have one day that's, say, just for CTC, and then you have a middle portion where both groups are hearing information that's pertinent to everyone, and then at the end, then you have the section that's just for universities and HRIs. So that's what we're looking at doing, and just a reminder, that's going to be October 28th through 30th is the scheduled date. Excuse me. Now on to legislation. So here are the things that we have listed under legislative updates, about a dozen or so bills here. The ones that say stage 7, they've already been signed by the governor. The ones that are at stage 6, those are waiting to be signed by the governor. I'd point out in particular, HB 80 is going to require the coordinating board to do one of those, projecting the need for studies, but to do 10 of them. 10 of them related to different health and allied health fields. Specifically, I have a list here. We're going to look at medicine, dentistry, nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, audiology, psychology, pharmacy, public health, and speech-language pathology. So that is quite a list, and that will be keeping us busy. Let's see, those reports are going to be due December 1st, 2023. HB 449 is about disciplinary notations on student transcripts, and I took a look again just quickly at the legislation to be sure, and yes, that is not restricted, say, to undergraduates or to any particular portion. So this could apply to undergraduates, graduate students, whoever. There are several bills here, HB 826, HB 2867, and SB 479, that were all geared towards some of the recently approved and founded colleges of medicine. And basically, it's an attempt to bring them into line with the other health-related institutions in terms of including them things like the Joint Admissions Medical Program and legislation related to GME and other things like that. 1065 relates to a rural resident physician grant program, which is going to, looks like the attempt there is to bring more recently licensed physicians out to rural and remote areas of the state. It's not a loan repayment program. We already have a physician loan repayment program. This is a little different. HB 1401 should provide grants to nursing education programs used from the permanent fund. So that could affect some funding relating to nursing education programs. So you folks that have graduate nursing programs probably want to take a closer look at that one. HB 3601 is about competency-based education and for military members. And again, I looked and it's not restricted by level. So even though right now it seems like from what I can tell, most of our competency-based education programs are undergraduate, they're not all that way. There are some at the graduate level, and this could allow the expansion of that if you're interested. HB 3652 is another one that it's on open educational resources. And again, right now, a lot of our state efforts are focused at the undergraduate level. But again, there's no reason that there could not be open educational resources developed for graduate programs. And if that's the case, we are going to be working to create a repository for that, for all of our state resources related to open education. Let's see, I already mentioned 479. 1378 is about GME. And this one, again, is about, I think, preserving the ratio, trying to ensure that we have plenty of GME slots for our medical school graduates. So if you have a medical program, you'll probably want to take a closer look at that one. 1755 seems to be related to tort and issues related to lawsuits. So that one I'm not as familiar with, but if you want more information, I can help you provide you with that. And finally, SB 211, relating to streamlining physician licensing requirements for APRNs. Does anyone want to ask any specific questions about any of these bills? Okay, great. Oh, you got one?
I have a question about HB 80, the study on the allied health professions.
Right.
When looking at the disciplines like psychology, I'm assuming that will be limited to the licensed mental health professionals. Is that correct?
I'll have to take a closer look, but my recollection, because I'm one of the analysts that worked on this bill, is I would imagine we'd be looking at the clinical, patient interaction-focused parts of these programs. Given that the emphasis here is on allied health. Any other questions? All right, thanks.
Okay, so our last item, number 14, discussion of future agenda items. And I don't think we have any. Do we have any carryover topics? Okay, so I guess we could start afresh. So do you have some topics that you think would be beneficial in discussing, similar to kind of the 3 discussion items that we had today? I think Dean said he...
So sitting through 6, 7, and 8 today, skills, value, etc., and given at least 2 articles from this week, how about graduate student debt? Not exactly sure what we do, or what we talk about, but given that there seems to be little correlation between graduate student debt and career path. At least that's what the articles seem to suggest this week. Seems like an interesting topic.
Any other topics? I feel like I'm in like that 8 o'clock class, you know, when the students are like, you know. So any other suggestions? I mean, I think we could also have you send, you know, email after you have an opportunity to sort of process the information from today.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't feel that you have to be on the spot now. Just let's think about it over the course of the summer, and then when we're gearing up for our first fall meeting, you know, maybe you could send us a few things between now and then and help us derive some topics for the next year.
Yep. So also things in the future items. I'm going to try to separate out the communications I send because through the course of today, I was like, oh, we'll send you this, we'll send you this, we'll send you this. So I think I'm going to send 3 separate communications, one with all of the references to things we talked about today and hyperlinks, so that can be your archival email. One for the financial travel reporting, and then one for thinking ahead for the future. And so the future one will include an open link for any ideas that come up between now and the fall meeting, and also availability for setting the calendar. I know last year when over the summer the group set the 3 meeting dates for the whole year. Is that sort of straw poll, is that helpful, having the 3 set? Is that the approach to take this year again? Okay, so what you can do between now and the next week or so is, if you know that there are dates that are just horrible, or that there's conferences or meetings that might affect many, let me know like what those dates to not include in those ranges are, so that when we build out the poll for availability, we can be sure to exclude those. But we'll send things separately so that you can identify, okay, this is what this is, this is what this is, instead of a big, long attachment.
So I know last year we had the ATGS conference, you know, and we also had the Conference of Southern Graduate School on the list of not to you. I don't know those off the top of my head, but we could get those to you. I don't know if our North Texas colleague here wanted to. So with ATGS, I think, is at University of North Texas, September 25th, 26th. Yeah. So I guess I did want to plug that because I think many of us do attend that meeting, and I think it was referenced earlier by 2 people in their quotes of the commissioner too. So, so it was, yeah, and I guess it's in Dallas. Where, yeah, I don't even know the details of what hotel or anything like that, but I don't know if anybody has that information. Okay, yeah, I was wondering. Okay, so I guess we could try to maybe reach out and get it, and then maybe we could, yeah, get Jennifer just to send it to everybody in case, so. Okay, anything else for the good of the group? Nope. Okay, well, safe travels, and I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Okay, all those in favor? All right, thank you all.
Thank you for coming. Safe travels, everyone.